Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and after a worrying first half, the Demons put the pedal to the metal to put the Tigers to the sword on ANZAC Eve. And joining me tonight to dissect what ended up being a clinical victory at the MCG is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Ben Man. Good evening to all our listeners. And wasn't that a great, and isn't a great spectacle, the ANZAC Eve game? It's very moving. It's much more moving, and the presentation and the environment is much better than what Essendon and Collingwood put on during the day. And if the supporters haven't been along to get to this game every year, make sure you do next year, because you really are missing out on something that's really spectacular.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think the fact that it's at night, you've got the people with their mobile phones, with the lights, the lighting of the cauldron sort of at night time is sort of a nice warm feeling. I was sitting in the forward pocket right where the players were all lined up in front of the banner. So that's the first time I've sort of been right up close to the players during that. I thought that was pretty special. And just the other thing I'll ask is, who conducts the pre-stuff, the stuff that's just before the lighting and all that, like the presentation? Is that on the clubs who's hosting the game? George, do you know anything? If
what do you mean?
The videos that they have beforehand, because I thought that the times Melbourne do it, it seems much better. I wasn't sure if it was whoever's the home team organises all the sort of anything you see on the scoreboard.
I would imagine that's the case, because they usually have control of those sort of things. Yeah.
I thought we do a better job than Richmond did with that. There's usually a little bit more to it. But anyway, that's not great, but the rest of it was fantastic.
It was a great night.
Also joining us tonight to analyse all the stats that matter is B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. I actually don't know the answer to your question, Andy, but my answer is that, of course, we do it better, the Ds. And so if it was excellent last year, or better last year, the answer is yes, it's D's, and then the Tigers let the side down. For a variety of compounding reasons, I didn't end up going to the footy, so I didn't see it live, and I concur. I've seen all of the previous ANZAC Eve games, and I totally concur with George's point. But for my sins for not attending, I had to suffer through, I think, the worst commentary performance I have ever heard. And I tell you, that bar is particularly low. And I've got a message for Jonesy, if he happens to be listening. I love the fact that he's going all in on being Mr. Objective. I'm not a Melbourne, I'm going to be a really objective commentator. But look, if he's going to be an objective commentator, all well and good, but he's terrible. He's a terrible commentator. He got so much wrong, including, and I'm genuinely frustrated with this, is including accusing Clary of staging, essentially, and saying, this nonsense about open-handed hit to the stomach, based on no evidence, based on one angle, which was behind, which showed nothing. So I haven't been impressed with his commentary, and I was even less so after the weekend. If he doesn't want to be an XD, no worries, but then be a decent commentator. And the rest of the team were even worse than him. So that was my punishment for not going to the game. Next year, I'm 100% going to go to this game. And they were bemoaning our performance in the first half, even worse than the Demonlanders on the game day thread.
So Bin Man, you've given up on the media, and now you're going to not listen to the commentary. What are you going to listen to?
Well, I can't. Well, it's funny that I tried the sync thing to be able to listen to it and I couldn't work. And I find it really hard to listen to it with no volume, like without having the crowd in it. So I had to suffer through, George, to listen to it. I didn't watch the halftime analysis on Fox. I watched a little bit of the halftime analysis on Seven. The only and her name, is it Abby? What's her last name?
Abby Holmes.
Abby Holmes is the only person on that whole team who is any good, and they should have her call a game. I'd be happy if she was the only Channel 7 person involved in the coverage of that match. It was really appalling. And I'm sure it was hopeless. And I've watched the replay 1.5 times, and it doesn't get any better.
I just want to say to Jonesy, the views of Bin Man do not reflect the views of Demonland. And if you do want to come on this podcast to be interviewed,
well, I'd be shocked. I reckon he's still. I get the feeling Jonesy's still not a happy camper about missing out on his premiership medal, but I don't know. He doesn't do us any favours in the commentary box, that's for sure.
Once again, the views of Bin Man do not reflect. Look, I don't begrudge. He shouldn't. I don't hate it when commentators sort of bring in any of their biases of their old clubs, and maybe he's
I agree with that too.
Not to have that and not to be accused of that, because a lot of commentators, you can see their biases still come out, and I probably shouldn't when they're watching.
Well, I 100% agree with that as well. But as I say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If he's gonna be objective and not fall in behind the D's, like Johnson does with the Dogs, for instance, well, then he's gonna open himself up for the full bin man force of criticism, because for one thing, he can learn how to speak clearly, and he can stop laughing like a schoolboy at Brian Taylor's stupid jokes. It was an extremely frustrating first half to watch that game. It was extremely frustrating, made it even more so by how frustratingly woeful the commentary was. But let's get into the footy.
You have to go to the game, Bin Man.
I know, exactly. It's exactly what I thought, George. It was the punishment for not going.
Each week I do put the call out for our loyal listeners to help us out by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We love the feedback, and we reward our loyal listeners who take the time to provide these reviews by giving them a shout out on the show. So Braggs Woden writes, the Best D's podcast going around. My Tuesday, especially after a win, and it'll be Monday tomorrow, are all the more enjoyable with this fantastic and informative podcast about our favourite club. Andy, Binman and George bring the right level of MFCSS therapy, delving into expected scores and how you can use it to get your garden flourishing, and what 4 to 6 weeks on the injury list really means. You guys are awesome. Keep it up. First-time reviewer and long-time Demonland lurker. That's Braggs Woden. Thank you for that awesome review, Braggs. It is very much appreciated. And Mr. Noisy writes, the Best D's podcast in the business. I get joy each week listening to the podcast, driving to work each week listening to George, B-Man and Andy allows me to comprehend the ins and outs of the game. I've just watched as a mental health nurse who works in a demanding industry. This podcast provides me with an outlet which is so beneficial for my mental health. Keep up the good work, boys. Go D's. Thank you, Mr. Noisy, and thank you for your service to the mental health space, because after watching the D's, we certainly need people like you.
And Andy, just before you go on, a PSA for Mr. Noisy and anyone else working in traumatic and difficult jobs: do not go on the game day thread during the game. I repeat, do not go on the game day thread during the game, which I didn't. I took my own advice. That's something at least I did on this occasion.
You do realise that by telling people not to go on the game day thread, that's in effect probably costing me some ad revenue and Demonland ad revenue.
Well, no, go on the game day thread right up to the bounce, and then don't go on it again until after we win.
So we've lost revenue and we've lost Jonesy.
That's right. Man, you're costing me so much money today.
You're killing him, Bin Man.
That's right. Let's get into the match overview. 2 weeks after a disappointing loss, the D's faced Richmond in a crucial ANZAC Eve match. The Demons were facing the prospect of dropping out of the 8 for the first time since 2020, whilst the Tigers, under new coach and former Demon Adam Uze, were facing their own challenges, including a significant injury list and only one win for the season. The game, attended by 72,840 spectators, started with both teams struggling, as evidenced by numerous skill errors and low scores, and it resulted in a tight contest with Richmond just leading by a point at half-time. The turning point came after half-time as the Demons' execution was cleaned up as they piled on 10 goals to 2 to surge to victory. Daniel Turner was an unexpected standout, scoring 3 goals in what was only the 4th AFL game for this defender turned forward. His contribution was critical, especially given Melbourne's recent forward line struggles. Jake Lever and Stephen May were instrumental in defence for the D's. Lever's intercepts and May's solid marking under pressure helped thwart Richmond's attempts to score in the first half and then helped snuff out any attempts at a comeback in the last half. Between them, they had 49 possessions, 22 marks, 21 intercepts, 11 rebound 50s, 8 1-percenters, 7 spoils and 7 score involvements. Max Gawn dominated the ruck contest and was a key figure in Melbourne's midfield resurgence in the second half, taking out the Frank Checker-Hughes medal, his second time winning that, joining other recent D's greats in Nathan Jones, Christian Petrarca, Clayton Oliver and Jack Viney to take out that honour. That win was Melbourne's 4th consecutive ANZAC Day Eve victory over the Tigers, taking the tally to 6-3 against the Tigers for these clashes. Any other comments about the game before we get into your stats files? George, you got anything?
No, I think we'll cover it off pretty well. There's various aspects of the game, but that first half was simply awful to watch. You know, the guys next to me were talking about comparing it with the local football. The skill levels were just the same. We'll talk about whys and why nots later on, but the fact that we could only kick 3 goals up to half time and then 10 in the second half puts all sorts of questions about it, and maybe it was just one of those bad halves. And I think the from Stephen May's interview, which we'll talk about, you know, when the coaches and the players were basically laughing about how bad it was, sort of gives you an indication that, yeah, we've just had a really, really bad half of football, but it was awful to watch. But we'll talk about all those things a little bit later on.
Later, because we do have something on that, but you don't want to be doing that against the teams in the next 2 weeks, but we'll talk about that. Anything, Binman, before?
Well, just we will talk about it during the show, obviously, but as the second half, not long into the second half, Alistair Nicholson, who isn't a bad commentator, by the way, I don't mind him.
He's not our ex-Alistair Nicholson, no.
No, he'd be better than Jonesy, but sorry, that's just all me, not Andy. He asked the rest of, I think he asked Ling, Cameron Ling, who was just an all-star, like commentary nightmare rotation for me, about was there any explanation for how poor the skills were in the first half, both teams. Were really, their skills were terrible and the turnovers were terrible. Were there any explanation? And he ran through some possible, ideas. Was it dew? Was there any environmental issue? Was there wind? They couldn't find an explanation for why we were so poor. And Ling said, well, of course, there's nothing. I mean, it just drives me nuts. I mean, why not then at that point, flag the fact that both teams are coming off a bye? Now, it's no coincidence that both teams were so poor, and at least open that up for some discussion. And it's, there's been quite a bit of chat this week on Demonland about this issue, and it's really interesting, Andy.
I put up article. I put that thread up on Demonland. I thought it was quite interesting. So if you want to delve into a little bit,
it comes up in a question that comes later. So and so I guess the real bugbear I have is that the high performance team and the high performance program is one of, I think, behind your player development, behind your list, behind luck, behind injury, one of the most critical determinants in your team's chances of being successful and winning a flag. And it's routinely ignored. And so it's really fascinating this week. There's actually, I think the media maybe been listening to the podcast, Andy, because there's suddenly been a bit of an upsurge in discussion about the impact of fatigue with the 5-day breaks and how unfair it is. Waitley's talked about it on his show, apparently, in terms of that question mark about how fair it is to have 5-day breaks. There's that article you put up that was in the ABC with some analysis of the breaks and over a period of time, which I'll touch on with that question later. And I guess at the heart of my frustration about that is if you accept that it's a key part of a team's likely success, we can debate about how much, and maybe people could argue that I overestimate its importance. But if you don't factor it in at all, which the media routinely refuse to do, like that question to Cameron Ling, well, then you've got a big bloody hole in your analysis. Both of the teams were coming off a bye. Both teams. And Goody said, we'll get it into a bit later, but Goody made it clear that they had 3 full sessions in the lead up to that game. We had 13 days after the Lions game. He gave the team 4 days off at the beginning of that. We had the captain's run on the Tuesday, which means, but they say they're back on deck on Tuesday after the Lions game, after their 4-day break, their bye break. Between the Tuesday and the captain's run, we had 3 full sessions. And that article you put up said a standard 7-day week only has 2 full sessions. So we did an extra full session of training, which means an extra load. And the other factor with the load management is it's not just anaerobic and kilometres that they're running, it's power and weights. And so both teams, potentially the Tigers did the same thing, had an extra session. I don't know. But if they did, that would at least go some way to providing some explanation as to why 2 teams were so poor in the first half. Because if they're doing big weight sessions, they're doing an extra session on top of their normal 7-day routine. Well, it's sort of logic to suggest that they're going to have jelly legs and their skills will suffer, particularly if they're coming off a low base already with their skill sets. As you know, that fatigue will exacerbate those skills. So at least raise it. At least raise it as one of the potential things for people to consider. You can ignore it. You can say, well, I disagree with Binman, or I disagree with that being, that's nonsense. It's an excuse, but at least put it in the dialogue for conversation. So, because to me it was dead obvious, but there's some questions about that later. So, yeah, I think there was some mitigating factors or reasons that might have contributed to the woeful skills in the first half. But, I think it's really worth focusing on the second half. That's the first time we've kicked 10 goals in a half of footy since we played the Tigers last year in July. So, it's almost 12 months ago since we've put 10 goals in a half of footy. And, people are furious about that performance in the first half. Well, the game goes for a full 4 quarters. So I think that if you're going to knock us for the first half, then we should be lauded for the second half. I mean, that was an impressive second half by any measure. An 8-goal difference. They only could score 2 goals in that second half. We scored 10. I didn't go back before, though it was quite coincidental that it was Richmond the last time we had 10 goals in a second half of footy. But I reckon it wouldn't have happened too many times under Goodwin that we've kicked 10 goals in a half of footy, and it wouldn't have happened too many times either that we're +8 in the second half of footy. So, I think depends where you focus your view, but I'm happy to look at the second half and a lot of boxes ticked there, I think.
I think you'll find a game in 2021, right at the end of the season, there was probably +8 in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 3 seasons ago.
100 to 7. All right, well, let's get into your stats files. Take it away.
So I thought it was a fascinating game. So it was incredibly frustrating first half of footy. The skills were atrocious, absolutely. But I thought it was a really fascinating tactical game. And they briefly touched on it, but in that answer by Ling about, well, what could some of the factors be for how poor the skills were in the first half? I think the other factor that's well worth at least factoring in and considering is essentially, as I said at the beginning of the season and have said since, is that Richmond and Melbourne have got almost an identical game plan. So it was two game plans basically playing head to head, both trying to play exactly the same sort of footy. And I think that was a big factor in how messy it was in terms of the ball movement, the patterns. Uze put a lot of work into, chose to put work into Petrarca, which was interesting, and elected to run two rucks against Maxi this week. We know Uze's relationship with the club and what he sort of IP he would have brought into that match. So, it's really interesting. The two players that he identified as players he wanted to put time into are Maxi and Track. And I think that sort of sends a pretty clear message as to who he values, at least at Melbourne, in terms of being influential and key players for the Ds. And no one would really argue with that, I don't think. So I thought it was a really fascinating game tactically. There was a lot of movement in between the arcs. Both defences set up really deep. So I think it was interesting to watch from that perspective, in the box. And really there's a question about this later as well, but really it was the classic, I think a really good example of what I've been talking about is our new blueprint for this year, the red and blueprint. So defence, contest, transition, back half football, scores from defensive half being the key indicator, and scores from turnover. It was important last year, but it's critical this year. And as I've mentioned, fitness, fatigue, all of those things. And on-watch clearances. So it's still a really interesting sort of question mark about clearances, and there's a fair bit of discussion on Demon Land this week about clearances, and there's a question about it. Working not backwards this week, or work backwards, started with fitness for the Lions game, but working back, going back to the beginning is defence, opposition score. Keeping an AFL team to 42 points is no mean feat. On expected score, that game we won by only 21 points. So I think that's worth absolutely factoring in. Can't have your cake and eat it too. But there's a query on that expected score that is worth exploring at some point, which came up in the Cats Blues game, I thought, which is essentially that if you're continually going back into a crowded forward line like we did last year with our really intense forward half model, 60% territory and lots of inside 50s, you're going to have a lot more pressured kicks at goal. So we got lots of clean looks, and they got some, but not many. I think there was that goal that Rioli kicked when he got the goal out the back in I think it was the third quarter. That was one of the few times that we get opened up out the back, and it was the outlier, really. So fantastic effort to keep them to only 42 points. But I really love the fact that we opened things up. The game opened up in the second half. We were able to transition the ball more effectively, but we still only conceded 19 points. Even with the ball in motion, even with us scoring, they couldn't really do any damage on the scoreboard. So, I'm sure, as in previous years, the club, as May talked about it, best and fairest a couple of years, they have the defenders have a target score, and I wouldn't be surprised if the target score is 70-65, which it was a couple of years ago, and we're doing well on that front. In terms of a key metric for defence is intercept and intercept marks. Last week, we're actually, as I mentioned, that we were +3 for intercepts and +9 for intercept marks. So that was really impressive last week. But interestingly, this week, we were down 4 for intercepts and down 1 for intercept marks. And I think that's a reflection of what I was saying before, is essentially Uze and Goodwin's game plan is almost identical. They rely on intercept marking. They set up in the same way that we do, except they don't bring an extra to the stoppage, which I'll get to a bit later. Last week, marks inside 50 was down 3. This week, we're up 3. But last week, the Oppo Lions had 12 marks inside 50. The Tigers still had 11, so we gave up 11 marks inside 50, which I suspect, even though we had 14, we're +4 for that. I suspect that Goody wouldn't, or the defensive team probably more, to be fair, wouldn't be thrilled with giving up 11 marks inside 50 and 12 the previous week. In the contested possessions, we talked about this last week, all-time lows last week. We were down 13 for contested possessions. We completely turned that around this week. We had 136 contested possessions to 119, +17. both teams' DNA is the same. As I said before, contested possessions is almost the key number, I would suggest, for both Goody and Uze, because it's a clear metric for effort. We are plus 17 for contested possessions, which was brilliant. The pressure was really interesting. We came out of the blocks, went hard, 185 in that first quarter, 173 to them. The second quarter was a real anomaly, and this is certainly sort of picks up George's point about how poor we were in that first half. And I'm sure, as much as they would have been, really focused on fixing our poor kicking at halftime, they would have been focused on this number. We only had 150 pressure in that quarter, in the second quarter, to the Tigers, who went from 173 to 181. They had 31 points more pressure points in that second quarter. And it felt like that they would have been really disappointed that they didn't get any scoreboard pressure on us in that quarter. I'm not quite sure what happened, where our heads were at. Did you guys have a sense of that in the watching live? It was really hard to see on the box, but how did you feel about our pressure in that second quarter?
You go, Andy.
No, you go, George.
The only thing I can think of is the pressure wasn't there because both sides were kicking the ball so poorly that you never got a chance to actually apply pressure. It was just going back and forth. Stephen May talks about it in one of the clips that we got. He just got tired from running back and forth.
Yeah.
So,
their pressure was all right. Their pressure was, remembering 180's AFL average, 200 to lead. Their pressure was 181, 31 pressure gap. We were lucky that they didn't put some scoreboard pressure on us in that quarter. And I suspect, as I say, that Goody would have been furious about that number. We came out in the second half in that third quarter, 181. We jumped up to 31 more points of pressure. They dropped away 168, and the last quarter was 162 to 162. The over in the match was 170 to 171. So we matched them. Last week I noted against the Lions a sort of anomaly with who our top 5 pressure players were, that there were younger players. The Colt was number 3, I think, from memory. This week it was much more back to normal in terms of who you'd expect. Jack Viney was number 1, 25 pressure acts. Tom Sparrow next, Clayton Oliver, who I had a much better game statistically than I thought, sort of watching live. Langers was 4th and Nibbler 5. So our leaders really stood up. Tom Sparrow is a really emerging leader, I think. I think it's fair enough to put him in that leadership group now, the senior leadership group. So his average for the season is 53, 44 is pressure points is what he got this game, but he was our second highest. Last week I noted that Track only had 12 pressure acts and 22 pressure points, almost half his season average of just on 39. This week it was much better from Track, 17 pressure acts. He had 33 pressure points, still under now his season average of 38.7, but much better. And those numbers are interesting in that question that comes up later. And so are some of these numbers, to be honest, that come up later, Andy, about our midfield. Tackles is a great indicator for effort. We were down 5 and also tackles inside 50 down 2. So 52 to 57 was the tackle numbers their way, 5 their way. They had 2 more inside 50 tackles, 9 to 11. That's really worth sort of remembering, and also the pressure that the Tigers put on, because I think the Tiger, it wasn't like we beat up the Eagles in the second half or the Roos. They never stopped trying. They were down some key players. They've been really hit hard by injuries. But I thought their effort and their pressure was excellent all game, to be honest. And Uze, in the post-match presser, he repeated that a couple of times, that how pleased he was with the consistent effort from the beginning of the match to the end of the match. And that's really borne out in these numbers for the Tigers being +5 in tackles and +2 for tackles inside 50. This was a massive one. Last week we got smashed for ground ball gets, and one of the numbers for this that I need to see if I can get hold of is post-clearance possessions. They're really important, but ground ball gets must be part of that equation. Last week we were down 21. The Lions smashed us for ground ball gets by 21, which is unheard of for a D's team, and I'm sure they would have been ropeable. This week we were +8, 89 ground ball gets to our 72 last week, so 17 more ground ball gets this week, and the Tigers got 81. So we were +8 for ground ball gets, but again, that's another number that shows the Tigers' effort was pretty consistent. You don't get within 8 ground ball gets of the D's without going hard for the whole game. This is sort of a watch on clearances, and it's going to be a conversation all season about clearances. There's total clearances and the scores from clearances. Really, that's been the case for a couple of seasons. Talked about it last season. Clearances are no longer the go-to stat and haven't been for a couple of years in terms of their importance. The big one is scores from turnover. That's where 60 to 70% of a team's score is generally from turnover. So it's not really about the number of clearances, and it hasn't been for a couple of seasons. It's about the quality of those clearances as measured by scoreboard impact. So this week, centre clearances were bang on 11 each. These are just the raw numbers. Stoppage clearances, we were down 9. So you could look at that and go, can we have such a, we've got the best ruck in the modern era, and we've got all Australian midfielders. How can we be down 9 on the stoppage clearances? There's a few answers to that, one of which is, as I keep talking about, we bring one less player to the stoppage. So statistically, we should be losing stoppages because we've got one less player to take it away from a stoppage. But the raw numbers don't tell the tale. As I said, it's scoreboard impact, which is critical. From centre clearances, they actually got 10 points 10 points from centre clearances to our 8, but we were +9 for stoppage clearances. We concede only 26 points per game from stoppage clearances, so we're the best in the AFL at stopping our opponents' score when they win a stoppage, and we're number 2 for scoring ourselves when we win the stoppage, just behind the Blues. We restricted the Tigers to just 3 behinds from stoppages the other night. That's just nuts. So we're averaging 26, conceding 26 points per stoppages, and only gave up 3 in against the Tigers, which is just phenomenal. And they're Goody would be thrilled with those numbers, as I'm sure McWalter would be as well. Hitouts we were +31 for hitouts, despite having 2 ruckmen thrown at him. Maxi went to town. Hitouts to advantage were only +5. Nankervis, who I think is a fantastic ruckman, I've got a lot of time for him as a ruckman, was 50% of his hitouts were to the advantage of his team. Contested marks last week, we were +4 and we were -3 for marks inside 50. But this week we were +3 for marks inside 50 and we were +3 for contested marks. So we actually took 4 less contested marks this week than we did last week. Only took 10 contested marks. There were only 17 in the game. So it's pretty low on a night that I don't think it was particularly slippery or, it was a pretty good night for footy. So this is a big one in terms of this new method that I've talked about. Points from defensive half is the best measure, sort of transitioning from half-back flank. Last week we scored 31 points. Our season average was 30 last week. It's now 32. The Lions only scored 20 last week. This week, we scored 45 points from the back half, from our defensive half, and the season average has gone up to 32.1. So above, really big tick. There's that question later that Stephen May talks about, but sticking to our game plan. And this is what you get when you stick to the red and blue print. You get 45 points from defensive half. Remembering we only had 23 points full, in all of our scoring in the first half. So we went to town in that second half. I don't know what the breakdown was, but it must be something like 30 points in the second half for points from defensive half. And they could only manage 21. And we're averaging 22 to our opponents. So we kept the Tigers, who are remembering they're trying to play exactly the same game as us. as I said last week, we got smashed in total stoppages, but we also got smashed on the scoreboard in stoppages. Last week, we were down 25 points from stoppages. We're also down 4 points from turnover. But this week, we were plus 19 for turnover, which is a huge, huge tick for this new way we're trying to play the transition turnover game. Massive. They'll be thrilled with that plus 19, particularly against a team who are trying to play exactly the same way. We were plus 17 from stoppages. As I said, they could only manage 3 points from stoppages. They got a point from a centre bounce and they got 2 points from a round the ground stoppage. So we're plus 17. And just the other one that's interesting is kick-in. We had 1 point from kick-in. They had nothing. That's no longer, I don't know how long it's been since it is a useful stat, but it really doesn't tell you much anymore. The teams do not go end-to-end in footy anymore. We had one chance of doing so and we scored a point. So plus 17 for stoppage around the ground and plus 6 for centres. That's plus 23 for stoppages. That's that's 4 goals right there, and then plus 19 on turnover. That's the game. That's the 43 points plus your 1 point for the kick-in. Just some general things. The time in forward half, 46-54, is how it ended. Interestingly, I thought this was fascinating, and it really goes to this new method in a way, is that they had 60% time in forward half in that last quarter when we were on top and dominating. We only had 40%. And I think if you want to have a sense of our new method and why I think there's a likelihood, there's this really another thing that frustrates me is people talk about efficiency all the time when they conflate efficiency and just accuracy. I just don't know why commentators in the media just don't call it what it is, if you're missing shots at goal, that's accuracy. We had inside 50s per goal. We took 10 inside 50s for each Tigers goal and only 3.65 for us. So for inside 50s per goal for us, for a goal was only 3.65. That's efficient. Missing the shot once you get it inside, that's inaccurate. And I don't understand why they conflate those two. What was really interesting, if you want to think about this new method, there's two. Disco's first point, where he got it over the top, where they pushed up the ground. The Tigers kept their defenders back, so they had 3 defenders back. We won it on a turnover. Fritsch had pushed up to the wing. Fritsch took the mark on the sort of wing half forward and kicked long to Disco, who was running back with the flight. Beautiful kick, weighted into a pocket. 3 Tigers defenders around it. But that was the perfect example of our, when our method works, this method that we're really trying to implement. And then his first goal was similar in the sense that it came off a turnover. We moved the ball really quickly and into an open forward line, and I think Track might have kicked it to him over the top, and he ran onto it and ran into the goal for his first goal in AFL footy. Those 2 bits of play, if you look at them, you can see the second one obviously on all the goals. They are how we want to play when it's working, both those scores. That's the key stats. I thought it was a fascinating game tactically and statistically, and I'm sure that the club would be really happy with the end result in terms of, this new method that we're trying to implement. We're going to have ups and downs, as Daniel Hoyne pointed out. We're going to have to wear some poor first quarters, poor second quarters, because it's no small thing to implement a sort of changed method that's still got the fundamentals that I've talked about, but it's still a changed method that at least from the beginning of 21. So a fascinating game, I thought, from the stats perspective.
All right, well, let's get into our listener questions, and we do start on turnovers. Monocular asks, is there any explanation at all for the turnover fest in the first half? Probably the worst I can recall, and from both sides. Travi14 asks, do you think our poor first half was just a byproduct of the bye, which you've suggested? Richmond were just as bad, and we managed to turn it around after half-time. Red and Blue Rising says, we seem to be playing well below our best. Poor disposal, connection issues, and seem to make easy passages of play hard. Other teams always seem to find time and space and are better at kicking to advantage. These are basics, especially for a team that has been consistently top 4. On the plus side, after all this, we sit 5-2 and in a strong position. Can we flick the switch and find our best when it counts? I got some audio from our mate Salty.
Hey boys, Salty here. if that wasn't the most frustrating 43-point win we've ever had. I just found myself getting constantly angry at a horrible use by foot. And commentators are saying, oh, no, they're under the Richmond pressure. That is BS. We just butchered it by foot.
So, George, it really was a turnover fest in the first half. I don't have the stats for the first half, but we had 73 turnovers to 69 for the match. We've averaged 63 turnovers a game so far this season, so that was 10 more than our average. 2023, we averaged 74, 22, 69, 21, 70. So not terribly skewed from previous years, but I think we steadied the ship in regards to turnovers in the second half. The first half was disastrous, and thankfully we weren't burnt too badly. However, in the next 2 weeks, we play the Cats and the Blues, and they have the personnel to do a lot more damage than the Tigers. So what say you?
I don't know the answer. As Bin Man said, there's all sorts of conjecture that you could put up there, but I still find it amazing that we could only kick 3 goals in a half of football and then 10 goals in the second half. I wouldn't underestimate how bad Richmond are in this game, and sometimes a team drags you down to their level, and they certainly did that in the first half. Of Richmond's 5 goals, 2 goals came directly from kicks from T-Mac and Lever in the back half. So that you take away those 2 goals, there was another opportunity that Fritsch kicked to Grimes, who missed the goals, but really we could have kicked. We gave them 2 goals certainly out of the 5. They only kicked 5 goals for the whole game. They would have kicked 3 if we hadn't given them those absolutely dead, uncontested, unfettered kicks where we kicked it straight to their man who kicks the goal. I think Richmond actually dragged us down a fair bit in this game. The fact that they've got so many injuries, I think their VFL side had 7 AFL listed players. They were really scraping the bottom of the barrel. We did a great job on people like Bolton, who was held well below his best in this game. They've got virtually no one in the midfield. Effectively, most of them are injured, and then Hopper did his hammy, I think, in the third. And
Martin's not the player he was, is he?
Martin's nowhere near the player. Nowhere, despite what the Richmond faithful think, he is nowhere. The fact that they're sitting him in the forward line because he can't run anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
They're a shadow of where they are, and the fact that I think they're 17th on the ladder at the moment, that's a fairly good indication of where they are. And I think, unfortunately for Uze, he's really picked the wrong time to go and be the coach. But also, they're still trying to run, as Binman's pointed out, they're still trying to run the same game plan, but with a lack of quality of players. So
there's no point they'd change it. If you think that's the right game plan.
They can't change it. They absolutely can't change it because that's what they've been practicing for the last couple of years. And but yeah, I think they dragged us down a lot from where when we finally decided to do whatever we did at halftime, drank the Kool-Aid or something, the game completely changed. They scored 2 goals for the second half. We scored 10. That's a pretty, and yet by any measure, it's a pretty big thumping.
Yeah, and I mean I think they struggled. I mean, it was interesting. Their pressure sort of stuck with us. We came out and went hard in that third quarter, but all game plans, but in particular this game plan that we're trying to play, and that's, as I said, it's the 2 teams both have almost an identical method. I think is very taxing aerobically. And so if you, for instance, have Martin and then you lose Hopper, and Martin's not giving you the kilometres to cover off someone, and you lose one of your best runners, you're just not going to be able to defend the way that, both teams employ an all-team defence model, but that, as we've talked about ad infinitum, requires all-team running and all-team elite running. And if you've got Martin not running out of the forward 50, basically being an old-school, forward who's put down there and told to stay there, and you lost Hopper, who was furious, as you would be, I guess. You're going to struggle to cover our run, which is how it seemed. They struggled to stop us once we got rolling. In that first, some of the stats were 55% disposal efficiency in the second quarter. And the other one was we had 37 clangers to us. So we had 3 more. They had 34. We had 3 more clangers than them. Just a reminder, clangers isn't just a missed kick. Clangers is also giving away frees. There's a whole bunch of things that are clangers. But yeah, it was 37 to 34 in the first half for clangers. That's a lot of clangers, 71.
Just delightful to watch, wasn't it?
Was it Dewey?
No. It was that's
at least
what
Cameron
made it.
Got that right.
Yeah, that's what made it so absolutely frustrating. It was a perfect night for football, and yeah, it was just awful to watch.
But a bit of that, I think, a bit of the messiness, leaving aside missing, as you know, it's been a bugbear of mine for a long time how poor our kicking is. So first half was incredibly frustrating from that perspective. Leaving aside the poor skill errors, it was interesting from a tactical perspective because so much was, it looked like there was a stalemate for a big chunk of the time in terms of, and a lot of the game was in between the arcs and, not helped obviously by the kicking. But I think that tactically, Uze did a lot of work to negate us and some of that was effective.
Yeah, he certainly did. And you have to when you're in that position of having so much quality missing from your side. You've just got to be negative at every possibility, and take Petrarca out and take Gawn out, and you can have a chance in the game. But it makes for an awful. Sorry
to interrupt. Who played on Bolton?
I was trying to say, I don't think anybody played on him specifically because he moves around the whole ground so well. I think it was a case of when he was in the middle, he was being chased by someone. When he was forward, he was covered by others. It was difficult to see, but they certainly were covering him wherever he went because he is so damaging as a player. I think he kicked 1 goal. Was it 1 goal for the game, I think?
Yeah.
He got out the back. You can't let him loose by any stretch of the imagination. So, but I think we did a great job on keeping him quiet, and that affects their side much more than keeping Petrarca quiet.
Yeah, and then you've got a player like Rioli who's just not enough to the game, is he?
Yeah, I
frustrated with Cozzy's effort a couple of years ago.
I have no time for Rioli. He sits out the back and looks for a lot of cheap stuff.
All right, let's go move on. Demon Jack 14 says pre-game there was an interview on SEN with Troy Chaplin, and he talked about us winning to get back to our brand and play more more forward half footy, which we did for patches. I thought it sounds like from his interview we overcorrected at the start of the season with trying to play back half footy. But where is the balance we are wanting to achieve? Is it a break even in inside 50s and still look to punish on turnovers and intercepts, or are we still wanting to convincingly win inside 50s and time in forward half? I've got some audio that I'll play from David King, and then Big Man, you can jump in with any response.
I want to talk about Melbourne in a different way. So they're evolving in the way they play. So it's a bit clunky at the moment. There's some horrific turnovers. So that's not Melbourne. We haven't seen that before, but they're trying to play with a bit more freedom with the ball. They realise that if you can't score off that half-back wedge, that it's called the defensive mid-zone. So from the centre circle to the top of 50 in your back line there, that half-back counterpunch, if you can't score from there, you really can't compete. So you look at the Premiers the last 5 or 6 years, scoring from defensive mid-zone. Last year, number 1 was Collingwood in the flag. 2022 was Geelong. 2021, it was Geelong. 2020, it was Richmond. 2019, it was Richmond. It's that counter punch when the opposition are disorganised and you've got full use of the oval. Melbourne last year were 17th post-bye at scoring from counter punch off halfback. So they know this. They can't win it without this being corrected. So this year they've gone to 3rd in terms of their ability to turn that possession into a score. Now that's a significant shift, Bix. And I like the fact that they're at least trying and exploring what this group can do. It looks awful at times, but they got 15 weeks to get it right.
It looks awful at times. It did in this particular match, and we played poorly against Brisbane. But he's spot on there, David King, and what we're trying to do. And it's interesting. what Collingwood really did well last year, particularly in the first 2/3 of the season, as I've talked about, they ended up playing pretty much our brand of footy, and ironically, they are this year, and I think they are this year because they're not yet up to speed with their running yet, but which is why they're playing to their strengths at the moment, which is, I think they're easing into the season in terms of the way they're playing. But he's absolutely right, David King, how we're playing. And so, for instance, last night, the numbers for our score zones is we were struggling to score from the back half last year, in large part because it wasn't our method. We were forward half. We got 13 points last night for a season average of only touch over 6. 13 of our points were turnovers in the D50. We got 6 points turning it over in the centre, and this is the big one. We turned it over on the wing, which is that sort of zone that he's talking about, D50 to the wing. There, David King, 21 of our points, and we're averaging just a touch over 21 this season of scoring from when we turn it over in the wing zone. So, and last night we got 18 wet points from turning it over in our forward 50, which is they're rolled gold, aren't they, when you can turn it over inside 50. So we're absolutely to the question. I heard that interview with Chaplin, happened to hear it, and so to the question, I think that even though Chaplin he did say that we want to get back to some of our fundamentals. I think they're still clearly trying to, they're not going to change their method. I think that, as Goody's noted in a couple of presses, you don't want to be losing in stoppages. You don't want to be losing in clearances. It's helpful to be to get time in forward half and more inside 50s than the opposition, but not at the expense. I don't think for a while we're going to see us winning time in forward half 60-40. So as an example, in that last quarter, we smashed them. We absolutely dominated that quarter, yet they had 60% of the ball in their forward half. And in a way, it looks the opposite to how it looked last year. And if you watched, I don't know if either of you guys watched the Blues-Cats game, the Blues played almost exactly like Melbourne were playing, where frustrating fans, they dominated inside 50s. They couldn't turn those inside 50s into scores. Some of it was accuracy, some of it was efficiency in terms of not hitting that kick inside 50, but they were frequently, because they were dominating time in forward half and inside 50s, they were frequently going back into a inside 50 full of players, full of 15, 20 players, whereas Geelong were rebounding off the half-back flank and getting it into a forward line with no one in it.
If you have a look, I've put into the pre-game thread some vision from Channel 9, whatever their show is, either tonight, with the Bartels going through exactly that, where the Blues are just bombing it in like we used to do, just to a massive players, and Geelong are just picking it off on the intercept. And they showed it time and time again, just bombing it in, and so one of the interceptors of Geelong are just coming in and sweeping and taking it out. And then they showed conversely how Geelong were bringing it up the field and just so easily finding a target, having 3 players leading out in different directions and hitting up someone. So that's something we're going to have to worry about, because if we're just going to bomb it in to our forward line, Geelong are just going to pick us off.
Well, except the fact that we're playing the same model as Geelong. Geelong and Melbourne are playing the same model. I mean, they were ruthlessly efficient. I'd love if we were as efficient as the Cats were. The difference is between us and the Blues is we've got a defensive system that's different to the Blues, and that's that Rioli goal that I mentioned. Think how rare that is, that teams get a goal out the back, despite we're playing this transition game of footy, which should open you up to goals out the back, and it did. The Cats still conceded 108 points, didn't they? I mean, there's no way Melbourne under Goody, since the beginning of 21, and we talked about it a few weeks ago, we've only conceded 100 points 3 times. We don't give up. When there's no way Geelong there's no way Geelong are doing what Blues did, for instance, to them, and they're not going to kick 120 points on us. But it'll be fascinating when how that will work out. But to the question, I think that if we don't want to get smashed in inside 50s, because that you're making it's going to be a hard yak to beat any team if you're getting beaten by 20, 30 inside 50s, although the Cats were down. They were down 20 inside 50s. It was like watching Melbourne last year where people would get so frustrated where we're winning, which, by the way, sort of raises a question about expected score, because I'm not sure how there seems to be a correlation between that high inside 50, win by 10 or 15, and you have time in forward half 55 or 60% with the expected scores being all out of whack. So I wonder whether that's a factor. And the other thing about having an open space is, like you said, you've got three players who can lead up the ball. We've got three players down there, well, two in particular, Petty and Fritter, who are both deadly accurate. And so if you can isolate them and get the ball to them, then you're going to obviously, be more accurate. So I think that we're going to stick with this method. The chaplain, I heard what he said. Of course, we want to win the contested ball. Of course, we want to win. Probably parity is what 50-50 is, I think, where they'd be looking for time in forward half just to maximise the space. We are sitting really deep defensively, really deep, and so did the Tigers. So there was a lot of space in the mid-range of the game, and it was played between the arcs. There was, that's one of the reasons why the pressure numbers were a bit down, because there were less stoppages, less time for people to hit each other, which is, as George noted about the game at Norwood a few weeks ago, is that on narrow grounds, just by definition, you're going to have a lot more contact, so therefore a lot more pressure. My theory is, come finals, is that all teams will end up playing a version of the forward half territory game, because come finals, the pressure just means it becomes more intense, more like rugby. Those chains, those great kicks to the corridor are harder to hit. There's more pressure. But I'm hoping that will remain key elements of what we're building now in come finals. In particular, our ability to sit deep, in particular, our ability to absorb defensive pressure, and to move the ball effectively off half-back flank. We've got the pieces of the puzzle, particularly when Bowser and Salo come back in. That's another big factor for this game. Two of our best kicks, probably our two best kicks in our defensive half, were not in this game, so that was a factor in the turnover. You put them back in there and suddenly your transition game looks a lot healthier. My other part of my theory around why clubs are doing this, and in particular why Melbourne is, and Clary, I'm not sure if you heard it, but he was interviewed on Channel 7 after the game by Jonesy and by Sarah Jones, not Sarah Jones,
Abby Jones.
Yeah. And it was a really terrific interview, I thought. I thought it was handled super well. I thought he was really interesting in what he was saying. And essentially what he said is, the last couple of seasons we've hit the finals banged up. And that this year we're looking at a different, he didn't sort of say specifically what, but that we're looking to be in better shape, essentially, paraphrasing, come finals. And I think this method is a big part of that idea, because it's less pressure. There's, if you think about how we played in 21, in particular the first half of 22, it was just hardcore footy every week in the trenches, and you're going to be banged up come final. So I think we want to improve our transition game, but I think a big driver of doing so is to reduce the amount of contact injuries, just by a mere fact that we're having less contested ball. It hopefully will mean we're fresher come finals.
And I think all teams at the top, at least, are playing the ball a lot through the corridor more than they ever did before. I think there's been a big change in the way Rivers plays, in particular, off that half-back line. He picks the ball up, runs, and drives it deep down the middle. It's not down to the wings, out to the sides and things like that, where you're trying to get contest and stopping the opposition from regaining the ball. Where we used to kick it to Max down the wings, that sort of thing. It's now drive it forward as quickly as you can. But it's all the top teams are doing the same sort of thing. So.
Which is a version still of, that's sort of the question about chaplains. So you want to, we still are a territory team. You want to get it forward. So like we've talked about, is that, we allow oppositions to switch. We try to avoid switching if we can. If we're going to do short hit-ups, then we take ground. And then Rivers, for instance, drives it forward, and we're trying to win that. That's where the post-clearance possession number is so important. A couple of years ago, we talked about it on the podcast that Hardwick says, and I think he still believes this, it's by far the most important stat in footy is the post-clearance possession. And that's, It doesn't matter what happens at clearances, whether you win it or lose it to a degree. It's what your scoreboard impact is from that, and winning post-clearance possessions. We're number one, as I said, from stopping the opposition score. And just on that rebound is that I just looked before is we're number one in the AFL for rebounding from our defensive 50. Number two, and no coincidence because they're playing exactly the same game plan, is the Tigers. Which is, I thought, a really interesting number in terms of how this game looked in the first half. Two teams wanting to rebound off the halfback flank with their defensive system set really deep and struggling to sort of work their way through the other team's zone, really.
Let's move on. Buck Naked asks, how did you see Petty's game? A Return to Glory asks, is Harry already in West Horsham? Lazy says, in the last 3 games, he's had 10 marks and 1 goal. In the last 2 games, he's had 0 and 2 possessions up to half-time. Is it really just the interrupted pre-season that is affecting him? It seems like the Richmond defenders were getting a lot of marks in our 50, and we really struggled to get the ball to ground. Interested to hear your thoughts. Monocular says, is Harry's horror run of form mainly physical or mental? Does he need to see the team psychologist? Personally, I think suggestions of him having checked out are offensive. Surely he would love another flag, even if he is planning on moving to SA sometime, and it would also lower his bargaining power if he ended up at Casey. And finally, a short bit of audio from Salty, and then George, you can give your 2 cents on that.
I know you talk about Harry Petty. I don't know what to do there, but something needs to change. He hasn't been that great.
That's it, George.
That's it. Okay.
Short and sweet. Really accurate.
Part of a longer message, and I chopped it up,
Yeah.
so it places it needed to be.
If I was Harry Petty and I got the delivery that he got in that first half of that game, I'd be walking off the field and going all the way to Adelaide. People blame the guy who's having the ball dropped on the top of his head or at his feet for the outcomes. It was not him. It was what was happening up the field. The other thing that everybody has already forgotten because he's playing is that he had no pre-season whatsoever. He only became available the week before the season started, and we've talked about this time and time and time again. If you don't get a decent pre-season, you don't play a decent season. Jack Viney is the classic example of that, and Harry Petty is in the same boat. The trouble is, who else have we got if we drop Petty? We fortunately seem to have found Turner as a viable option. Our next options are Ben Brown, who we needs a rest every now and again, and Shaki. There's no one else. It's Harry Petty or Ben Brown when he comes in for the which he will at some point come back in. But yeah, you can't blame the guy for what he was getting, and you can't blame the guy who's barely staying on the ground because, like I said, he hasn't had a decent pre-season, got the fitness levels up before the season even started. He'll get a rest, but at the moment we have no other options.
It's interesting. His form has been down, but you make a good point, particularly in that first half. There was one kick that it was just I was tearing my hair out, and he must have been too. And it looks like he's getting a ball patch, So perhaps that's what he's been doing, is tearing his hair out. But he led straight up the middle of the ground, and it was a perfect lead. Just needed to be weighted in front of him, and they put it on, as George said, put it on top of his head, and it was just the sort of frustrating kick that drives fans crazy, but I'm sure drives the forwards even more crazy. Petty's numbers have been all terrible, and we talked about that last week, even worse against the Lions. I guess if he's in the team, he must be following team rules. So if he goes out this week, Goody, as we've talked about often, is such a systems coach. Structures are so important to him. He knows that Petty will follow his direction. It was really interesting seeing after the game Daniel Turner and Fritter being interviewed on the ground. They both look almost identical size, and so does Petty. So you've got 3 players, mobile forwards, now playing up there. Maybe wonder whether Goody's got sort of a different plan. He's always seemingly got a plan for the forward line, but 3 players that looked pretty similar in height and size up there at the moment, mobile. I'd like to know what role, is potentially he's got. He didn't look like he was playing a defensive role on any of the interceptors, did he, George? It
No,
didn't look
not
like
at
he
all.
was trying to negate Vlauston, but structural, there's plenty of games that T-Max played and Brown's played where on the scoreboard they've done nothing, or even on the stat sheet, yet they're, Goody will say in the presser, really important, bring ball to ground, structure and all of that stuff. The other thing that's interesting, and going back to my, I guess, bugbear around the lack of conversation about high performance programs, is one of the other problems of not discussing or not sort of being cognizant of the high performance program is they're not discussed. They're not analysed. It was really interesting in the Cats Blues game that the way they're managing Guthrie, I think it's Guthrie, or Guthrie and the Irish guy, Tui, is that they're resting him and managing him. That's part of the program. It's what they did last year as well, the Cats. It's what they successfully did in their premiership year. They managed players. We've got a different philosophy of the way we manage players. It seems like Selwyn's taken a lot of the philosophies of Burgess, one of which is that you use playing to keep players fit. In that article you linked on Demonland, Andy, it noted that in a normal 7-day week, there's the captain's run, there's the 2 main sessions, and then there's weights. The match count in a 5-day. When you go to a 5-day break, the match counts as the main session. You don't have any sessions, or a 6-day. You have one session and the match counts as one. And so I wonder. It seems to me that Burgess's philosophy was that resilient stuff. It seems to me Selwyn's got a similar philosophy of playing players who aren't cherry ripe. He hasn't looked, Petty, to my eye, hasn't looked fully fit since he came back in. Just on that check-out stuff, I totally agree. There's no way, he wouldn't be playing. Goody wouldn't be playing him if there was any way that Petty had psychologically checked out. He'd be nowhere near the ones. Goody doesn't.
Same as Grundy.
Well, that's right. And then, so for me, which puts a question mark on why Grundy wasn't in the team at the end of the last season. Goody, that's one thing Goody won't do. If you're not all in, he's not playing you. He's no NRL coach who will play someone who's left. It's just not going to happen. So I reject the idea he's not all in. It's his body language. He's always been like that, Petty. He looks like he's going at half rat power all the time. I'm hopefully he'll get back to his best and silence some of the critics. It'll be really interesting if he gets dropped this week. I think the message is that he's not playing his role, but seeing he's getting selected, Goody, sticks with teams that win. I can't see him being dropped in the immediate future. But as large part is just what you said then, George, is who's going to replace him.
Yep. But just in terms of the heights, we've got Fritsch 188, 6'2" in the old measures. Petty 197, 6'6". Turner 194, 6'4", and JVR 193, also 6'4". But that doesn't take into account. I'm assuming they're the heights that they all came in the AFL with. I don't know if they measure them each year, so that might be their heights.
How tall was Pets?
Pets is 197, 6'6".
Shit, that's taller than I.
Petty's the tallest.
He's hunched over all the time. Stand up, fella.
Yeah, Petty's the tallest.
I mean? So there's 4 players. I forgot about JVR in that mix. There's 4, not Ben Brown sort of basketballer heights who, that makes for a pretty interesting mix-up forward, I think.
All right, well, let's get on to the disco. A Red and Bluebeard says, keep up the great work, fellas. Disco Turner forward was a move that none of us saw coming. Does he keep his place when Big Benny Brown is fit again, or does Petty make way possibly to find some form? Assuming we don't play all of Disco, Big Benny Brown, JVR and Petty in the same forward line, what is the best mix of forward talls? And for that matter, is Petty a better second rucker option than JVR? Phil C says, I love Disco's games, but don't know a lot about him. Where do you think his best position is on the field, and how does he keep his spot given the competition for places? I assume bagging 3 goals is one way to do it. Travi14 says, our forward line, I wrote last week about Petty not being a forward but having to play the role due to lack of options. Disco was great, but we shouldn't read too much into it as very similar to Petty's good performances. It was a very weak opponent, and being a bit of a surprise selection, Richmond wouldn't have put a lot of time into that matchup. I've got some audio from our good mate Enzo.
And Turner, he is a forward maybe Petty should go back and Turner should say go forward. And he's an old-fashioned full forward. He actually leads up to the ball. Amazing. Kicks goals. Great. We found another one.
So, Big Man, your thoughts on Daniel Turner's surprise selection as a forward? Previously, he's only played 3 AFL games, all in defence, and in his 26 VFL games since round 11, 2021, he's only kicked 1 goal once. So he's played very limited forward time, even in Casey. I know the week prior to this game, they threw him in after halftime. He kicked a goal in the forward line. This week, he's kicked the 3 goals from 13 disposals, and most importantly, he's taken 8 marks. So what do you think of his game and the selection to play him forward?
Well, I don't think it was much of a surprise, to be honest, for Demonland readers or for Demonland listeners, because they showed their hand in the VFL game. That they played him forward. He looked I'm totally with Enzo there. He looked every inch a natural forward, and I heard a couple of interviews with him. He seems like a ripping young bloke, good country stock. He was a forward as a young fella. So he played his junior footy, he said, in his all of his junior footy as a forward. And Melbourne, he's been a defender since he came to Melbourne, and I think they see him as the sort of heir to Lever. He reads the ball super well. He's got good hands. He's, when he has in the game in a bit that he's played at senior level previously, he zoned off and he read the ball super well, confident in the air. It's well worth remembering is the Goody and the club obviously rate him super high because he was in this corresponding, or actually it wasn't the corresponding game, but his debut was against the Tigers 2 full seasons ago.
So that was Queen's birthday against Collingwood when he had his jaw broken.
That was his debut. Then he played the Tigers game. So that's right. So they thought enough of him 2 years ago to bring him into a Queen's birthday game, and he acquitted himself really well in that first half before getting his jaw broken. He looks every inch a natural forward. I think he is every chance to stay down there. I don't think it's an experiment that it's, if it is, it's a happy experiment, but they've obviously been thinking about it. They played him at VFL level. He leads well, as Enzo said. He times those leads well. He leads like he's played all his football as a junior footy as a forward. He's got great hands, a good clean kicking technique, and really it's not too big a stretch to say he was the difference in the match in the end. He's what turned it in the end. His leads and his ability to make sure that he did something with him. The first goal, was it the first goal we kicked? The second goal we kicked, the one where Langers kicked it inside 50 was another good example of the benefit of the method we're playing, because he kicked it into a uncrowded forward line, creating the opportunity for Turner, who read it really quickly, to run and take a diving mark down forward. But that was no easy kick to go back from that angle. I'm not sure where you guys were sitting, but that was a 40 metres out, not quite 45-degree angle, to nail it was super important that he did. But the other bit of play that I think was really, really important for the match was he went up, came second man into a contest. Really, they did a bad job at blocking him, which is perhaps the point about maybe not putting enough time into him in terms of tactically ahead of the game. Didn't mark it, but brought the ball to ground. He got the ball that sort of bounced up into his hands, and he handballed it over the top to Fritter, who kicked on his right foot. That was really the end of the game, and that was such a good contest. He came from behind the contest. He read it well, and you've got to love his enthusiasm and how energetic he was. So I think he'll stay up forward. I've never thought it's been as sold on as some on Petty as a forward. Only he doesn't look as natural a forward as, say, Turner did. I'm not sure what you guys think. I'm happy for Pets to stay up forward, but I think Turner's will definitely stay up forward. And I can't see him going out of the team. And I know that I'm not sort of, one game is not, one bird or swallow and a spring and a and a sparrow and whatever. But just based on that, just on how natural he looked, I think we can get used to seeing him down there for quite a while.
The important thing with Turner being discovered is that we all should know what our position was come at the end of last season, where we barely were able to have bodies up in the forward line at all. Now with Petty and Turner and JVR and Ben Brown, we know that Ben Brown needs to be rested. It gives us options that certainly at this time last year we didn't have. Just as equally down the other end, because T-Max filled a role that nobody thought was possible at the start of the season. We don't need to send Turner or Petty down the back line because we've still got people like Tomlinson and Hoare sitting in the VFL able to play down there. So it's just giving us more options. Instead of having one or two options at both ends, we've now got 4 to 5 options. So, Turner I don't think will be moving down back anytime soon. And injuries will occur at some point in the game, but we're in a better position, I think, in the second half of this season, having a Turner available to us.
Chaplin's our defensive coach, isn't he?
Yeah.
He, in that interview that was asked about before or referenced his SEN pre-match interview, he talked about having Turner taken off him. And he said exactly what you just said, George, is that I don't think I'll be getting him back anytime soon. And that was before the match. So I think that, or perhaps I'm pretty sure that was before the match that I heard him say that. So, but you're right, George. The other interesting thing about what you just said is that 3 of those players, Petty, McDonald and Turner, are all excellent defenders. And all, that creates some real flexibility in terms of flipping those 3 players around, whether you need to because you get an injury or tactically you want to do something a bit different and you can bring T-Mac up forward and swap him with Petty, for instance, or, Pet needs a bit more of a time, a bit more confidence and you can move those pieces around. So, and given that all 3 of those players have spent time in our defence, you could expect that they know the systems and they can slot in pretty easily.
Delightful Play says, I would love to hear a bit about how you would rate Laurie's performance once he was subbed in for the final quarter. He's been a bit of a Demonland whipping boy, and so objectively around his performance, or bench warming traditionally, has been in short supply. P.S. Look forward to the new app after your well-deserved bye last week. And I'll just like to apologise. We were going to do a preview show early in the week, but I couldn't. I had prior engagements. So apologies to any listeners who were expecting. You can always go on demonland.com, check out the podcast thread and see what's happening when we're going to be live if you aren't checking out Demonland. So, George, what did you make of the limited, albeit fruitful, minutes we got to see from Bailey Laurie, which included the 2 goals from 5 disposals in 19% game time?
I don't think you can read a great deal into it simply because he was in the right place at the right time to get a couple of goals. People who watch football tend to like goal kickers, and so it looks fantastic. But like you said, the guy only got 19 minutes on the ground, and he wasn't playing in the midfield where he plays most of his time at Casey, and his absence at Casey was really sorely felt this week. But he got some game time in. I noticed him after the game having to do a lot of running up and down the field to get the miles in. At the moment, he's another nice option to have. We'll talk about who comes in and who goes out later on in the program. But he certainly did everything that was required of him in this game.
B-Man, you want to add anything before we move on?
I just agree with George. It's really hard to sort of read too much into it, but good on him for taking his chances. I loved his banana on the run, and I think that it's another one that you've got to take a line through what the club are saying about him, in the sense that they keep selecting him, don't they? They've obviously got a lot of faith in him. Am I wrong in thinking he was recently re-signed, or am I confusing him with?
Yeah, I think he was. I couldn't tell you what the terms were, but I'll have a look up while you're talking.
Yeah, I mean, a bit hard to read into it, but I love that he took his chances, and we know he's a good kicker. So, he was brought in with Bowser, 2 players with good to elite kicking skills, and I hope that he's going to get his chance at some stage. I think the challenge for him is that his best position is inside mid, and it's pretty hard midfield to crack into at the moment.
He signed a 2-year contract extension back in March that takes him to the end of 2026.
Yeah, so that gives us an insight, I think, into where the club rate him. And he's been on the emergency list or sub or round about the team for a good year and a half now. So hopefully when he gets his chance, he'll stay in the team and he'll make every post a winner.
Lazy says, I really liked Trent Rivers' game and he's making this level of performance a standard. Can we expect to see him push into the midfield soon? I really like what the Bulldogs did last week with Ed Richards and I feel this could be similar. Big man Rivers had his 24 disposals, 12 marks, 10 defensive half pressure acts, 5 rebound 50s, 4 score involvements, 3 intercepts. Pretty good game from the young lad.
Yeah, not a good game, not one of his best games, but an excellent game. Will he push into the midfield? I don't think so now because, as George noted before, that role that he's got of getting depth, getting 50, 60-metre kicks to run and carry, get the ball, he's taking those handball receives a lot, running and carrying and kicking at 60 metres. I think he's really, really important to how we structure up and play from that transition footy that I've been talking about us trying to implement. I think he's almost the fundamental key to that model, really just because of what George said about the way that they're using his, depth of his kicking. He's also got that ability to be, to still defend. He's not like a freewheeling halfback flanker who hasn't got a player or who doesn't do the work defensively one-on-one. He works back super hard. If you watch him, I love watching him play. He works back super hard to help out on, to be a third up in aerial contests or to double back and to make sure that there's not a free player. You think how few times that the opposition get free players in when we're on. He's big, he's important to that. But really the fundamental part is what George was saying before is the run and carry and kicking at 60 metres. He's a beautiful long kick. And he also is becoming a fantastic intercept mark and one-on-one mark. He's a terrific player. I think that you'd just be losing too much bringing him into the midfield, to be honest.
Well, I might bring this next one up. We were going to talk about defence next, but since we're talking about halfback, you've also got to realise that we don't, we've lost Brayshaw at the start of the year. Salem's got his injury, Bowie's got his injury as well, and that brings us to Woden and the halfback flank. So Monocular asks, who should take the halfback flank while Bowie and Salo recover? To me, it doesn't look like Wowie at this stage of his career at least. So big man, with the loss of Brayshaw on the eve of the season, as I mentioned, the injuries to Bowie, Salem, we've been forced on the fly to fill some big shoes. A fortnight ago, Wowie was thrown to the Wolves early in the match against the Lions, and he's had, the 13 days to prepare for a full game in that position. How do you think he played on Wednesday, and do you think he will stay in that position until one of Bowie and Salem return from injury?
Working backwards, I think he will. I was fairly critical of his game against the Lions, more so from a sense he didn't look like a natural defender, and I was sort of reflecting there's potentially I've got maybe a bit of a set against him. I thought he was much better in this game.
Well, were you surprised that they played him again, in that we had to play him there the other week? They didn't have to play him there this week, so were you surprised?
No, I wasn't, because it's sort of who else comes in.
Well, that's the question. Yeah.
So then, if you don't play him, I was thinking, well, what do you bring Hunter in? He wasn't ready. Hunter's not going to go back to the halfback flank. Maybe there was a thought that sort of someone put on Dean Lamb, which I think made sense to a degree, that you could probably move Windsor back to a halfback flank. But again, he's not played as a defender.
What about, and George might be able to answer this, Moniz Wakefield, who that's where he does play, and he's had great raps on him, but is it too early to bring him in?
Potentially. I mean, I think the thing, there's a question about this is, or I can't remember this question, but you noted this, how young we are. How, we had 8 players under 40 games or something, or 9 players under 40 games in this match. Wowie's one of them, but Wowie is put on a fair bit of bulk. So you need someone physically down there who can sort of take the hits. Someone on Demonland today sort of talked about Howes being sort of similar to Hibbard's role, that player who can play big and small, which I thought was a good point, but also Wowie's a bit similar in that sense that he's really put on muscle from last year. And so I thought his game was much better this week than last week, and I did wonder whether maybe a bit like with Laurie last year that I've got sort of subconscious set against him a little bit. I think that he's a solid citizen, and he's the sort of player that Goody loves because he will do what he's told, basically. He'll play the role that he's assigned. He won't go chasing kicks to pad out his stat numbers to increase the likelihood of getting picked, because that's not the way to get picked in a Goody team. It's to do what you're told. So I thought there were a couple of really key contests that he won. I watched the replay in mind a little bit and looked at him. His numbers weren't huge. But the answer to will he stay in, I think they've shown their hand. They picked him this week. They would have probably tried someone else. So I think he stays there, and maybe Salem is the player that replaces him. Bowes is still, I think, 4 to 6 away.
Three to four. They said
3 to 4, and
2 to 3.
what's
down.
Salem?
Same. Or 3 to 5.
Yeah. Except that that was last week's report.
Yeah.
By the time we play Geelong, Salem will have had 25 days away.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So he would have to be very close. 29 days when we get to the Carlton game. So I wouldn't be surprised if Salem's actually back this week.
You reckon he'll be back this week? He was listed last week as 3 to 5. That's
yeah. Well, that's normally for a hamstring. It's 3 weeks. So wait and see. But so I wasn't as impressed with Wowies. I was sitting up rather high in the stands. His awareness was not really good from what I saw. He had opportunities to do a lot more than what he did. Will he stay in there? Laurie may well come in and play that role as part of the rotations. It's difficult to say. So, but he's a young player with a lot of time to be around the club. He's obviously done enough to this stage. He has put on the muscle necessary to play at the higher levels. Young players will have good games and bad games. This wasn't a spectacular game, but gee, compared to all the others, the other 36 players on the ground, there was a lot of very ordinary performances on the day as well. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting call.
Last week he only had 139 metres gained in what was a pretty woeful performance across the team. But this week it was 300, almost 295, 5 contested possessions. He had 5 intercepts, which is important given how important intercepts are. 5 marks. It took 1 intercept mark, so much better game than last week, and I can't see them dropping him.
George, how far off do you reckon Andy Manise Wakefield is, or is it too many young kids?
I wish he was clamouring to get a position in the senior side, but he seems to be one of those players, and we've got a fair few of them, unfortunately, at Casey, who are too good for Casey, but not quite good enough for AFL. And Manise Wakefield's problem is, where do you actually put him?
I can't see him being a small defender in the sort of Jets mould, maybe, but not really the halfback flanker who might have to match up against a Bolton, for instance.
And especially since we're playing a different, like you pointed out, a different style of play from that halfback flanker. It's not the old lockdown defender type of position. It's you're our number one attacking pawn, so to speak, in the back line. It's a different sort of game.
And he hasn't done his apprenticeship. So if you think of Woden and Laurie, and then even JJ when he was at the club, there's players who they use the sub bench. They're in and around the team for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I think that we get a pretty good insight as to who the club are thinking the next players, the cabs off the rank, by who's on the emergency list, who's on the sub. And Andy hasn't been near it yet, has he?
No. But and I'm not suggesting that he should be, but there have bbeen exceptions to those rules. Judd McVie, Blake Howes, all coming sort of straight into big roles that you know.
Well, at the beginning of the season, both though.
That's true.
That's a bit different to, you know what I mean? Like, there's no time to when you get picked round 1, there's no time to be in and around the team, at least this season. But yeah, it'd be good. Both those examples are true.
Buck Naked says, thank you. Thank the Demon for our defence. Kept the Tiggers to 42 points when we couldn't hit a target to save ourselves. Our game really starts and finishes here. Scroll says the first half wasn't pretty to watch, but thank the heavens for Stephen May and Jake Lever intercepting and marking everything, with the exception of one poor turnover kick by T-Mac, which cost us. He has also been fantastic as a third tall in defence. So, George, our defence really is a blessing. I reeled off the combined stats of May and Lever earlier: 49 possessions, 22 marks, 21 intercepts, 11 rebound 50s, 8 1%ers, 7 spoils, and 7 score involvements. And you add T-Mac's 14 possessions, 8 marks, 8 intercepts, 4 rebound 50s, 3 1%ers, 3 spoils, and 4 scoring involvements. And a picture gets painted of just how crucial our key defenders are. And add to that, keeping another team to under 50 points for our second time this season. And I think we've also got the lowest points against us by 31 points over Fremantle. So another feather in our cap to our defence 7 games into the season.
Yeah, you can't be more appreciative of what the defenders are doing, not just May and Lever, but the whole side. You don't keep a team to 42 points because you've got 2 good players in defence. It's everybody doing their job. It was really spectacular to watch them working together. Like I said, if it wasn't for a couple of really awful turnovers inside the opposition's forward 50, they would have kicked 3 goals in this game. Just consider it. This is an AFL side being held to 3 goals on an absolutely perfect night for football. That tells you how much ahead of them we are, and certainly how great our defence is. Even the most miserable sides generally kick 5, 6, 7, 8 goals maybe.
Yeah, but look at their injuries. They don't have Lynch and Bolter in the forward line. That's a big,
Well, yeah, that's like I said, they're completely decimated as a side. But
the midfield, what's his name? The meatball. Taranto, they're missing some
but
key
we also
players.
kept, that's what I was saying last week. Yeah, we were woeful against the Lions, but they only scored 82 points against us.
Yep.
And there are plenty of teams who get opened up when they play really bad, like the Saints. After that game, they got decimated, but no one was, that's when that conversation about the 5-day break came up. Now, we didn't have 5 days into the Lions, but talked about the impact of that cumulative fatigue. But the Saints, despite the fact of they're number 2 in the AFL for the least number of scores, they still got opened up. And we kept the Lions to only 82 points. It also showed, though, that game and this game, if you look at them together, is how important when you talk defence is what Goody keeps talking about is there is no defence and offence. They're interconnected. Is your defence just does not work if you're not putting pressure on the last kick inside 50, for instance, or they're moving it super quick off the halfback flank and we can't get set up our systems or our structure back there. So everyone has to contribute to it, but it's just awesome having Lever, isn't it? Lever and May down there. And to think, we got Hawkins this week and you go, well, automatically, who is the best player in the AFL most suited to take Hawkins? May.
Laurie.
Yeah, Laurie. They were awesome, but the way they know, they're so comfortable with this new method. One of the things that I think Goody's doing differently to other clubs with similar methods is how deep we're staying and how much time we're absorbing in our defensive in 50-metre arc. And we just look so comfortable taking that risk of allowing them to bring the ball in and then being able to exit. I forget which game. I saw a bit of game yesterday and the ball was coming back in really quickly and they just looked all at sea once it came back in the third time. It felt inevitable. I'm just trying to remember which match it was, but it felt inevitable that they were going to get scored against because of the re-entries. It just never feels that way against the Melbourne's defence. It's like they need 10 re-entries to score. All those players. Lever was brilliant and so was Steve May.
The other thing with the defence is I've been really impressed with the return to form of Langdon.
He's big defensively, isn't he?
Gets back all the time. And even Caleb Windsor, the work that he does to get back and fill holes, create not options, but blocking up the opposition's forward line. But Langdon's been fantastic, both at both ends of the ground. But that's all part of the all-team defence.
Yeah.
Years ago, you would never send a winger being credited for being a defender, but that's what it is these days.
Box to box in soccer terms.
Yep.
Just quickly, Andy, and the other thing that I think is wonderful about our defensive system is how quickly has Howe's become a best 22 player. There's never any talk about him getting dropped. He's like he's part of the furniture already. It's only 7 games into the season, and he's just been amazing down there in terms of the sort of mix of players that he's able to take. He just seems like he's a 200-game player and just become an integral part of that back seven. With 7 rounds into the season, and it looks like he's been playing with that unit for 6 years.
Apologies, my stats were wrong. We have the lowest points against us. The next one is, in fact, Sydney with 29 points different. That's because Hawthorn only scored 42 points or something today. I was going before. I took my stats before the Sydney game, and I was assuming Hawthorn would score more than 40-odd points.
And it's a timely reminder that outside of the flags, I think there's only been one flag in the last something like 30 years that's been won by a team that has not been in the top 6 for the least amount of opposition scores, and that was the Roos back in '99 when they were playing the Pagans paddock.
Totally different.
Totally different footy. So, essentially you're not winning a flag unless you're in the top 4 defensive teams, and we're the best defensive team of the last, probably decade, arguably.
Jane02 says, just wondering what you thought of Caleb Windsor being subbed off in the last quarter. I know Laurie came on and made an impact, but I thought Caleb's game was okay. Are they managing him? I know he's just a kid, but getting some more game time into him on the big stage seemed to me to be a no-brainer. So, George, did you have any issues with the way that we used the sub this week? It was late in the game. Match was sewn up. It can't hurt resting a young player like Windsor and giving another young player like Laurie a run to see what they can do. I don't think it's a slight on Caleb Windsor.
No, absolutely. It's absolutely what you need to do. As when later on in the season, people will be saying, "Oh, why didn't we give him a rest? Why didn't give you rest in games as well?" And this was the perfect opportunity. There was nothing to be gained by not taking him off. In a sense, just remember this is only round 7. It's his 7th game ever. He is slotting in brilliantly on the wing. Hunter, for example, will have a real struggle to get into the side the way that he's playing. And the other thing was, you can't leave Laurie on the sidelines yet again, especially with such a long break. You've got to get some miles into his legs as well. It was naturally the right thing to do. Nothing. He wasn't taken off because he wasn't performing, because he certainly was. Particularly that goal that he intercepted goal just before half time. That was just
run.
Just gut running
and from behind as well.
And the other thing that he does so brilliantly is people don't catch him. We don't want to make comparisons with great players, but boy, when you see him and you do go, Robbie Flower was never able to be caught the same that Caleb Windsor is unable to be caught. There are times where you go,
he's just able to run in sort of a little bit of an arc.
Yep.
A little circle, and they just can't catch him, and then he's off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Robbie was able to do. But his ability to avoid getting smashed, which you'd think he should in some cases, just doesn't seem to happen. And he delivers the ball pretty well as the general rule. It's only 7 games, so let's not burn him out. Let's keep him towards it where we'll probably need him towards the end of the season.
And just on that point, George, that's what I was going to jump on and say, is that 100% agree. It wasn't because of form. I watched the second half just before the show started, and really he was super important. There was that goal he kicked, which he read that beautifully. If you watch it, he was sweating on that kick.
Long way away, he read it.
He was just licking his lips and just waiting for that error. But in fact, there was a bit of defensive work that he'd done previously that really was critical. He saved a goal, making a good decision down back, pushing back into the defensive arc, and really making a nuisance of himself back there. And he made, I forget the exact circumstance, but he made an excellent decision with run and carry and then a kick that he took on. He had a fantastic sort of 15 minutes, and then he not long after that he got subbed off. Again, that's that discussion, touching on what I'm saying about the sort of lack of discussion, or even like any sort of level of analysis of the high performance team. If you think of the other big young gun player at the moment, Harley Reid, West Coast elected not to play him at all this week. Such was their, and it was purely a management thing. I mean, he won them a game last week, and they're not travelling him to play Gold Coast this week. And they've said this is a management, this is, how this is going to be his program. And sort of reinforces the decision that they've got to make about individual programs. But it also sort of made me think, well, Melbourne under Selwyn Griffith and under Burgess before, they don't rest players very often. They'll use the bench, and as George and you, Andy, pointed out over time, is they also use time on ground a lot. How many minutes that they do, in game. So, yeah, no issue at all resting. I've been thinking you could even start him sub this week, for instance. I could see actually Hunter coming in this week, and Laurie being the poor bugger who misses out, with Caleb starting on the bench and coming in for Hunter or Billings in the last quarter to add a bit of zip and a bit of run.
Smurf says, missed you guys last week. Didn't get my Demonland potty fix, and neither me nor the old pup Jonesy got any exercise. Well, there you go, Jonesy. You got a dog named after you. I thought May's post-game interview on Channel 7 was interesting, especially in regards to acknowledging the poor disposal and the turnovers that resulted, and that rather than going into their shells and reverting back to the long down the line after halftime, they stuck to the game plan. Thoughts? So, Big Man, I'll play the audio from Stephen May's post-game interview, then you jump in with your thoughts. Here we go, Maisie.
That first half wasn't our best football. I feel sorry for all you guys watching at home. It wouldn't have been too nice to watch, but luckily Richmond didn't take their chances in terms of we had some poor turnovers. We're able to regroup and look after the ball a bit better.
What did Goody say at halftime, or what did the players as well? Because you knew that you weren't playing your best footy, but how did you really bring that out in the second half?
I think we were expecting a bit of a spray or something because it was so poor, but he almost sort of had a laugh and said, you guys are better than this. We're not going to change the game plan and just fix your fundamentals and the game will start to turn. So, I'm glad he didn't, we didn't just start kicking along down the line and we kept trying to shift the ball a bit and not go into our shells.
Maisie, that's what it was, wasn't it? You just couldn't hit targets and maintain possession. You'd give it back to them, they'd give it back to you. It was like the twilight zone out there in that first half.
Mate, it was a lot of running because you'd start to get involved offensively, turnover, sprint back, turnover, back. I was just like, this was very frustrating.
Ben?
Yeah, I think we covered that before in terms of sticking to that game plan. So, you don't introduce a new game plan and then give it up at halftime of a match, do you? If you want to embed it and make it sort of instinctive for the players. It makes an interesting point, though, doesn't he, about the impact of turnovers on the defensive system. You turn the ball over, everyone's out of whack, and everyone's got to sprint back to cover defensively. It emphasises even more how fantastic our defence was, that they did that sort of running and were able to maintain that right through the whole game. And I think they hit the nail on the head. Is really, I think the first half was marred purely by how poor the kicking on both sides was. But outside of that, apart from our pressure being only 150 in the second quarter, I guess, but outside of that, it wasn't sort of disastrous. It was just that if you keep turning the ball over, they will be annoyed that they couldn't take advantage of it on the scoreboard, Richmond, and partly that was them and partly that was our defence. But equally, we didn't take advantage of their turnovers. That was the other frustrating factor. They turned it over plenty of times and butchered it, and we couldn't take advantage of it in the first half, but we did in the second half by sticking to our guns.
That T-Mac turnover where he kicked that really just short across the middle of the ground, Dusty ended up getting that out the back over May, and that was because May had gone up forward.
He wasn't happy either.
He was still in the offensive drive. Ball gets turned over. May was, can't blame that on May because,
I'm not sure which commentator it was. I credit to whoever it was. I did get a laugh out of one comment, which was that May and Lever were like an old married couple, which I thought was pretty funny.
They do that if you watch them every week, they're like that. But that's why they work so well together.
And I just got to note that Smurf's dog's pup is called Jonesy, and which is fine, but just not as a commentator.
Once again, Big Man's views do not reflect my own. All right, let's get into our midfield. El Diablo 14 asks, what's going on with our midfield group? I feel Petrarca is regressing, Viney very inconsistent, Oliver in his hand, Sparrow far from his promised arrival to the front of the pack, no Gus or Salem. Seems like the midfield group is now the forward line from last year. I actually like Cozzy's cameos in the midfield. It injects energy and dare that is otherwise missing. Monocular asks, why have our three midfield guns, Clary, Jack Viney and Track, gone off the boil at the same time? I can't remember any of them, let alone all having such a poor run of form. So we have some audio from Salty, and then, George, you jump in with your 2 cents.
I'm also really quite concerned with our midfielders. It just doesn't seem like we're putting on the same sort of pressure as we've seen previously. Clary's down. Track's been down for the last few weeks. I think a few of them are quite down, and I'm really quite concerned about how we're going to go against Geelong and Carlton. I can see them really opening us up. And if you're a betting man, I think we're favourite against Geelong as I call in now, and I would be putting big money on the Cats to do a number on us. Just interested in your thoughts about that.
George?
Midfield, it's a difficult proposition that to know what's going on. I don't think that there's actually a big fall-off. In this game, Petrarca was really heavily tagged by Marley and Pickett. So, yeah, you sort of expect the actual numbers to drop down. Viney, I suspect, might have been carrying something for the last couple of weeks. He was magnificent early on in the season, particularly in Sydney, but seems to have dropped off. Oliver, we know about with his hand. He's coming back to his best, I think. Now that he can pick up the ball, people should not underestimate how hard it is for a player who uses his hand so much to not be able to hold the ball. So that problem seems to be fixed. But people, as Binman has said before, people have got to get away from depending on clearance numbers to determine who's going to win the game, or it's about the quality, the ability to get, it's the next possession after clearance. It becomes critical, what you do with it and where it goes to on the ground. It's really difficult, and the unfortunate thing is we've also been spoiled by this midfield group that we've currently got. But also there's a bloke called Max Gawn in there who's still probably the best ruckman in the competition, who's part of the same midfield. So
probably 100% is. He's so much better than the next. It's not funny.
So it's a bit hard to sort of say, we've dropped off. Well, we're coming from a pretty high base in the first place, but I don't see it. With Oliver back, we've now had we'll now get 2 decent breaks. That was critical. It's very hard to judge when you're playing, 3 games in, 19 days or something like that. There's a lot of pressure, and the midfield's the hardest part of the ground to play in.
Much ado about nothing. Absolutely. It's like in this match, I'm not quite sure what people were expecting. Is that, as I said, I already made the point that we smashed them for stoppages, leaving the Brisbane game. That's an outlier. We are number 1 in the AFL from defending stoppages. So scores from stoppage from our opponents, and we're number 2 from scores from stoppage. So that's our midfield. The number 1 ranked player in the AFL at the moment is Maxi. And in this game, our top 3 our rated players under the player rating, which, as I said, the coaches, the players and the clubs put a huge amount of store in this particular stat because it measures impact. It hoovers up a whole lot of different data points to measure the impact of every single possession and every single involvement a player has in the game to come up with this rating. Is Max Gawn in this game? His predicted rating going in was only 15. He had 25.6 6. Our number 2 player, despite getting tagged for the entire match by Marlon Pickett, was track. He was 16.4, and much to my surprise, our number 3 ranked player was Ollie, was Clary, was 15.2 player rating. So our top 3 rated players in this game were our midfield, Maxi, Track, and Oliver. So, the eye didn't back that up, and the numbers don't back that up. We're killing teams at stoppages. Forget the raw numbers of total clearance. They're of no value whatsoever. Teams can't score against us. And we score heavily when we win stoppages. It's quality over quantity. And again, I keep banging on about this. We set up with 1 player less at almost every single around the ground stoppage. Yet we still got those sort of numbers and still got that sort of return on the score board. That doesn't happen without an absolutely elite firing midfield. The only player really, I agree, George, is Jack's dropped off, Viney's dropped off. And in this match, for instance, his ranking was only 3.2 points, and his expected was coming into it was, let's have a look, was 12. So he has definitely been down the last couple of weeks. There could be all number of reasons for that, one of which is likely to be the load management program that they've gone into the buy with and post-buy. And just a point on that is that my point before about them giving them players the 4-day break straight after the Brisbane game is they could have flipped that and done all of their 3 extra loads the first week and given them a break in the second week to maximise how fresh they were for the Tigers game. There's no doubt in my mind that they didn't do that because the target game is the Cats and then the Blues.
D. Me says, we're blessed with having May and Lever to organise the backs. I assume Viney, Track and Max provide leadership for the mids. However, we don't have a ready-made leader to organise the forwards, which I think is significant. So there is a tendency for them to act more as individuals than a cohesive forward team. Your thoughts, solutions? I see Milksham possibly taking that role, but that's probably not a long-term solution. So I assume injuries and that ever-changing lineup has contributed to a perceived lack of leadership amongst the forwards. Binman, do you see this as being an issue on game day? And if so, do you have a solution?
I don't know, really. I mean, I wonder whether Petty, what sort of leadership he provides down there. I don't really know whether the sort of forward line has the same need for that sort of
general
ongoing leadership as the defensive system is, because if you watch them for a few minutes down back, they're pointing everywhere. They're pointing for people to get to specific spots. In the forward line, it's a bit more obvious. You run to the empty spot and hope someone kicks it to you and not over your head like they did to Petty for the first half. So it's an interesting question. I wouldn't say there's a natural leader. You'd expect
look at Geelong. Like you would think Tommy Hawkins would be,
he's a natural bloody pointer. I don't know if he's a natural leader. I think Fritter's natural aggro, he gets into people. So it's an interesting question, and to which I'd probably say that we talked about it a couple of weeks ago with JVR's interview that he did when he re-signed, is that how great it was that he identified himself as wanting to be a leader. So perhaps he'll be the player that grows into it. So it's an interesting question. I don't think there is a natural leader, but I wonder whether there's quite the same need for sort of a leader like we have with Lever and May up down back.
Well, this also is up your alley, Bimman, so you'll probably be taking this one. Doug Reamer says, given how flat-footed and error-ridden we were again by foot, is it too audacious to hint at the fact that Selwyn may have put a bit of extra loading into the group, and you've hinted on this already, to utilise the extra buy that we get this year, knowing full well we have enough talent to beat the Tigers at 75 to 80% rat power? Is it arrogant to plan a few weeks in ahead, but maybe the club is putting more weight into the upcoming games against the Cats, who we have an extra 3 days break on, and then the Blues, our own 5-day break? These upcoming games are top 4 shaping games, 8-point games, dare I say it. D. Knox adds, thinking about the long and short breaks, I noted that when we play Carlton, it will be a short 5-day break, but the game against Carlton will be our 3rd in 16 days and 4th in 29 days. While for Carlton, it will be their 3rd in 13 days, 4th in 20 days and 5th in 27 days. What does the pod think is likely to be more important, the single short break or the cumulative effect? So I guess we've got that 5-day break going into the game, but Carlton will have played a lot more games in the last 20 so days. So, big man, the L word loading's your forte. I'll defer to you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, rather than sort of justify my case, is that I think exactly that's what they've done. So I agree with Doug Reamer, but we know that they did because Goody said he was interviewed right before the game. And so that was one benefit of watching it at home, is that he was interviewed, like literally he was walking to the bench, to the interchange bench, and he was asked about what was your post-buy or your buy sort of program look like. And he said 4-day break after the Brisbane game, so back on deck on the Tuesday the following week. Then 3 quality sessions was exactly what he meant. So what he said, and on top of that, in that article you said there's weights around that. So in a normal 7-day period, which that was in the lead up to the Richmond game, you would normally only do 2. So we know because the senior coach said they did 3 main sessions. Right, so they did an extra session. So by definition, they did an extra load. And I think that's what we saw part of that in that first half. We saw an impact of that. And let's say for the sake of argument, I have no idea if this is the case, but let's say for the sake of argument, the Tigers did the same thing. Then you would have 2 teams who have done an extra load in the lead up to the game. As to the question, so yes, I think that's exactly what we've done.
Do you want to just explain the theory behind sort of loading?
No, it's too late in the day. Other than to say
the only reason I say, because you have people who might be new to the podcast who haven't heard the L word before. And
the short version is that it's about preparing a group of athletes, or it began in individual athletes, but has been in sort of international athletics forever and a day, which is preparing yourself to peak at a particular point in time, which is normally your gold medal, if it's at the Olympics or whatever you're wanting to peak. So for us, it's peaking in the last week of September, or probably a couple of weeks before that, physically peaking. Instead of 1 individual, you've got 44 individual, and that you can't, in order to remain fresh, in order to be able to be in your best shape, it goes up and down. And that article you posted was a really interesting, the first time I'd read something on sort of a mainstream, so it was an ABC article about the impact of that, about the impact of the breaks. That wasn't specific about loading. It was the impact of the breaks between games, which is that second part of the question. It has 2 parts, which is anaerobic and aerobic, and then power and strength. And essentially, if they increase their loads, they need a period of after that to deload. And they use the buys period of time. It's the only time in the year, during the year, that they can do that. They can load the players up with extra and then give them some time where they're not training. And the idea being that they get, they're in peak physical fitness at particular points. The upshot of it is that historically Melbourne has played very poor around the buys, either before the buys or after the buys. There's a cumulative fatigue through the season, and on top of that, the load management is to protect them against that. So it's not just about peaking at the right time, it's just managing their entire sort of program so that they're fatigued. My view is that they have target games. I agree with Doug Reamer, is that they would have taken a calculated risk not to be as fresh as they possibly could be for this game, so that they maximise their chances of being as fresh as possible against the Cats. Keeping in mind we've only got a 5-day break into the Blues game. So what Maxi said after the game, Goody said before the game they had 3 big sessions or quality sessions in the week in the lead up to the Tigers game. I heard Maxi interviewed after the game. He said they've got 2 sessions planned this week. And that article that you linked, Andy, suggested that when teams have a 5-day break, they don't have any main session. The game itself is the session and they just do skills and turn it over. So I suspect we had 3 coming into this game, 2, as Maxi said, and then I would be guessing we don't have any sort of big session in the 5-day break coming into the Carlton game.
I think the other thing, the second part of the question is around the cumulative effects, and that's pretty straightforward in the in AFL, it's a long, hard season, and you've got to keep your players in the best possible condition you can. The young players suffer greatly from that. But I think we're also starting to see across all the competition, teams on a 5-day break do not play well. So that gives us an even better idea of how well we played in the gather rounds.
Exactly.
To be able to play against top-rated sides in Adelaide and Port and off a 5-day break and win was a remarkable effort. You've only got to look at some of the other sides like St Kilda off a 5-day break where they got absolutely, completely smashed. So I think we'll see more of that as the season goes on, but we're holding pretty well considering that this will be our second 5-day break against Carlton.
Yeah, and so that question about what's more impactful, I don't know, I raised this last week about tracking this number. And just to be clear, I track that number not for wins and losses, but for points, so what the line is. And so always factor in. And that article said that there's about a 6-point, in footy, that's a lot. In footy betting, that's a huge amount, 6 points between the impact of a 5-day break. And that article also discusses the impact of accumulate. Like we played 3 games in 13 days. What's the impact of that? So that question, I don't know. I don't have enough expertise to know. But I suspect a 5-day break into the Blues game doesn't matter. Like it will be mitigated somewhat by the fact that the Blues are having 4 in 14. I think that question said. I still think we'll go into that game with a big disadvantage in terms of preparation. But to answer Doug Reedman's question is that they plan this stuff. When we interviewed Selwyn Griffith, they plan it every single minute of the entire program. The entire year is mapped out in advance. And, of course, they've got to do change. And on top of that, they've got their individual programs. Some players are power players like Track. So he might have done a whole bunch of weights into the lead up to this game, for instance. Or Viney might be doing his weights because he's a power player. And then you deload him so he's as fresh as possible. If he comes out and he's eating leather against the Cats, well, at least part of the puzzle will be the high performance getting him in a position where he's in peak optimal fitness for that game. And then, I think the clubs, I think the AFL have run themselves into a huge problem here because they've given 8 clubs an advantage potentially with 2 buys. Because then they can structure their high performance around those 2 buys, which is what Voss talked about doing with the Blues in their first thing. The advantage Melbourne have got is that our first buy was 6 rounds into the season or whatever it was, or 5 rounds in. The other, so Richmond and Melbourne had late buys, which means that we've only got 5 or 6 weeks to the mid-season buy. I think they don't know what the outcome of that is and what the consequence of that is. And I suspect it's going to give the Cats, the D's, Tigers doesn't really matter, but the Swans a massive leg up come the end of the season, the ability to rest players for, one more time.
That article, I think it stated that I think we played 2 or 3 5-day breaks this year, but also importantly, but works against us, we don't play any teams off a 5-day break.
No. And we've got one. Our only advantage that we've got all season is what's coming up now, is that we've got 2 extra days into the Cats game, but it doesn't really matter, I don't think, once it's 7 days. 7 days is the period. And that article, again, this article, we'll put it up on the links or we'll put it on, is that historically, in footy, it was Saturday to Saturday. So you could plan your structures around that because it also talks about the impact of flying and different environments. And also it emphasises the importance of routine to athletes and says that if you take players outside their routines, they're going to struggle. If it's like the Demonland podcast, we're doing it on a Sunday and then a Thursday and a Tuesday, and I'm all over the shop.
Yes, I'm just trying to find that. The thread on Demonland is called "How Rest and Preparation Dictates AFL Performance." But what I'm going to do is take that link, put it in the podcast round 7 versus Richmond thread. So if you are listening to this and you're not a frequent Demonland person, just go into Demonland and look for the podcast round 7 versus Richmond thread, and you'll find a link to that article.
If they've got it right, I suspect that we will be unbelievably ready for next Saturday. And then into the Blues game, who knows? Like I think it's so variable. 5 days is ridiculous. They should not be asking, the AFL should not be asking elite athletes to back up, what is essentially a half marathon. 5 days later, asking them to run a half marathon. But in addition, let's just, smash that person running a half marathon 35 times between the beginning of the race and the end of the race. And then 5 days later, we're going to ask them to do it again.
Yep. All right. I've linked that article in the podcast thread. So if you want to go have a look, go to demonland.com, search for a podcast round 7 versus Richmond thread. You'll find that article. It's very interesting and might give you a bit of an insight into what we've been talking about. Next one, we've got a voicemail from Enzo, who is unhappy with Demon fans. I'm going to play the Demon Landers and Demon fans, probably more so Demon Landers, and I'll play the audio and then the two of you can have your say. Big Man, you wanted to tee up something after that, so let's just hear from Enzo and let's see what he has to say.
G'day, guys. Andy, George, Bin Man. Andy, my new best friend. Actually, it was a very good win. I'm very happy. I went to the game. It was a great event. It was so beautiful, that game. I've got a gripe there, fellas. You know what? Our supporters and people on Deanland are a sad sack, bunch of sad sacks. I had to stop reading the post thread on Demonland after about 7 posts when all there was complaints and complaints. Oh, we play like that against Carlton, we're going to get smashed. Oh, this. I had a few conversations with Collingwood supporters after they beat Hawthorn just. And do you know what? All of them were ecstatic. Not one of them complained about it. Our supporters are a bunch of spoilt brats. Stop complaining about 7-goal wins. They only scored 40 points. Yes, there was a few stupid turnovers in the first half, but do you know what? The boys cleaned it up in the second half. The turnovers weren't as bad, and they cleaned it up, and we won by 7 goals, 43 points. It's a great win. Thank you very much, fellas. Have a great night, and go D's!
I feel personally attacked. I don't think I was saying it on Demonland, but I probably was thinking it. So yeah, I feel personally attacked, Big Man.
I'm feeling a bit worried because this is the second call from Enzo that I'm 100% with him on it, because I posted on the post-match thread. I didn't go into the game day thread because it's not good for your mental health.
About the post.
Yeah, I know. So I went into the post
game day thread and then the post game thread just to separate them.
Well, I'd point out what Enzo said is right, is that we smashed them in the second half. I've followed Melbourne for a long time. There aren't many times that we've kicked 10 goals in the second half, and even fewer times under Goody. I mean, there's probably I could probably put my finger on a few, but we kicked 10 goals in the second half, which is the first time we've done since July 30th last year when we played, coincidentally enough, the Tigers. That's a long time between drinks where we've kicked 10 goals in a half of footy. That's, I think I counted it up. It's 12 matches or something that since we've scored 10 goals in a half of footy. We're 43 points. People would have been falling all over themselves if we'd scored 111 or 113 to 70 points and won that game, because people correlate high score or seem to suggest high scores is good footy. Well, defense is good footy as well. And the idea of home and away seasons is what? To get you 4 points and get as much percentage as possible. You get more percentage winning 83 to 40 or whatever it was than you do 113 to 70. It's just math. So, we come out of the game with 4 points and a 7.6 percentage to our percentage boost. I mean, by any measurement, that's a pretty successful day at the footy. So there's that. And then the other thing of Enzo is afterwards, because even in the first handful of post-match comments in that thread, I thought, there's a film, that Life of Brian, that for me answers every single one of life's big questions, and it immediately came to mind. And just once again, Life of Brian answers the question. And so, if you could play the clip, Andy, that'd be great.
Thank you, sir. Arthur Denari for his bloody life story. Though pleasing some people. That's just what Jesus said, sir.
there is no pleasing some people, Andy.
Am I wrong to have won by 80 points?
It still wouldn't be enough. A good team would have won by 120 points.
Enzo is right, though, isn't he, that we're a little bit spoiled when you see the performances over the last certainly 4 years with the club. We're starting to get a bit greedy. But I think the one point that Binman just made was about percentage. This year, if we look at the corresponding time last year, I seem to recall a number of teams were nearly up to 200% in the competition. But this year, there's most of the teams in the 8 are running around about 125, 140 or something like that. So it's pretty, and it will be for the rest of the season now. There's teams not breaking out. By the end of the season, the top 4 to 6 will be pretty close together, apart from winning games on percentage, and it may well be very critical. So getting a percentage boost at this time is going to be very important to us come the end of the season.
Exactly, and the way to increase
those teams that were on 200% last year had both played West Coast and North in the first 7 games.
Yeah, but it's once you've got that, it's hard to lose it. Yeah. But they haven't done it this year, so
that's exactly right, George. And the best way to get a percentage boost is to keep the opponent to as low a score as possible, not to score as much as you. It's not to win by 40 points. It's to keep the opposition to as low a score as possible. A 7-goal win when your opposition only scores 40 points is going to get you more percentage than a 7-goal win if they score 100 and you score 143. So, that Blues game, Carlton game, everyone would have loved that. The AFL would have loved that game. Goody wouldn't have loved that game. 2 teams scoring more than 100 points. As I said, only 3 times since the beginning of 21 have we given up 100 points in a game of footy. Both teams in that match, gave up 100 points.
I was on mute. All right, let's get into. We have a voicemail from Molly, who had an encounter at the footy with Colton Tolstrup. So let's hear what she had to report. We've got it here.
Hi, boys. This is Molly from Eltham. I was just calling in to let you guys know that I was at the game on Wednesday night, and it was great to get the win. But halfway through the first quarter, the Colt actually came up and was sitting behind us. And I just wanted to let you boys know that he bleeds red and blue. He loves the club, talking up every player, telling everyone how he is the best kick in the AFL and he's got the same boots as Bailey and how Stephen May's one of the toughest blokes going around. And it was just great to see a young player talking up the club. And I just thought I'd call and let you guys know. Love the pod, long-time listener. Keep up the great work. Thanks.
So it seems like he was talking up the club and himself.
I love it. I think it fits with the glasses, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so pleased. That was a great call, Molly. I'm really pleased to hear. He seems like a real character. There's a video on the MFC of him and Windsor doing some sort of shtick about questions, who's the best kick at the club or whatever, and he seems like a ripper young fella. Sorry, George.
Yeah, Colt was about 4 or 5 seats in front of us at the MCC when he arrived very early in the first quarter. So I hope we weren't too noisy for you, Molly, as well.
So Molly, there you were just rose away from Demon Lamb royalty in George. So yes, next time just got to be careful what you say at the footy. You might get overheard. All right, well, we didn't have this. I actually missed this one, and I only remembered it while we're going. We had Demon WA ask us a question about season to date, and I didn't, for some reason, I had left it off the notes for tonight. I'm just going to go back to and read it straight off the podcast thread. Just let me scroll down to it. I had it before, but I lost it when we went to the when I put that link there. Here, Demon WA says, keen to get the panel's view on the season to date. So what are we? We're a quarter of the way through, or over a quarter of the way through, or a third. I'm happy sitting 5-2, but realise we have a tough little block coming up. Whilst our form hasn't been our best in every game, our results have been about as good as I would have hoped for. Losses to Sydney at the SCG and Brisbane aren't cause for dismay, in my opinion. I think we'll learn a lot about where we are at over the next 2 to 3 weeks, but I am continually frustrated by the posters on Demonland. That's another one. And various social media platforms that seem to expect champagne football every week. A win is a win at this stage of the season, in my opinion. So, guys, start with you, George. What a third of the way in or a quarter, whatever wherever we're at the moment. How are you feeling and about our performances?
Things are falling into place nicely. We knew that we had a really rough run with the last around the gather round period. We're also playing top sides at the time that we're getting these short breaks. So the fact that we're not only competitive or getting close, even in the losing games, is really telling. The other thing I think people need to keep in mind is I talked about Salem before. He should be getting close to being back. Bowie can't be too far away, but in about 2 games' time, short of any other injuries, we're almost going to have a full list available. So that's telling going into the midpoint of the season. And apart from Salem with his hamstring, we're not suffering any other real soft tissue type injuries. We haven't even had any hard injuries, so to speak. So we're looking pretty good at this stage. 5-2. We've been playing top sides off short breaks, and we're still very close to where we need to be. I think Geelong and Sydney, for example, have had a couple of easy kills on the way. So it's not surprising they are where they are. I think we'll find out really this week against Geelong how good we are, and that'll give us a good comparison for the following week against Carlton. I think Geelong were a little bit flattered by the Carlton game this week, but we'll wait and see. At the start of the season, I thought the old legs at Geelong will break down come the end of the season. We're already starting to see that with Dangerfield this week, but we'll talk about coming games shortly. But we're happy where we are.
I reckon we're in a great spot. I've been right at the beginning of the season before the first game. I said 6-2 is the goal. We want to get to 6-2. We win this week. We're 6-2. We don't win this week. It's not the end of the world. 5-3, travelling well. Third of the way through the season, we're 5-2 at the moment. We're 4th on the ladder, again back in the top 4. We've got the 4th best percentage of any team in the AFL. We've played 3 of our 7 games have been interstate, which I think needs to be factored in. The much talked about 3 games in 13 days. We've had 1 game already with a 5-day backup into playing the Adelaide at Adelaide Oval. So 5-2, 4th on the ladder, 4th best percentage. We've also got 4 of our best 22 to come back into the team. Salo, Bowser, Hunter, Melksham, McAdam. I'm not sure whether he fits into the best 22, but he's ready to roll probably a few more weeks perhaps at Casey. So I think we're in really good shape. I think that we're one of the 4 contenders. I have Giants. I don't rate the Swans as high as others, but for me, it's the Cats, Blues, D's, Giants are the teams that are around the mark. I don't think Port will be because I don't think they're defensively strong enough. But I just every game is not a litmus test for our premiership chances. If we lose this week, we're not going to get blown away. If we do lose this week, it won't do anything to my confidence unless we're really woeful and they smash us and there's an obvious gulf between us and the Cats, but that's not going to happen. So win or lose, it's not going to do much to my sort of sense of where we're at, but it'd be great to get to 6-2. We get to 6-2, I think the draw really opens up after this 5-day break. We've got a bunch of games at the MCG. We've got a pretty good run home. We've got another bye to manipulate and use that as well. So I think we get to 6-2. We're locked for top 4. So I think we're in really good shape.
All right, let's get on to the Casey game. We'll go through it pretty quickly. The Casey Demons took on a severely depleted Richmond VFL team, which had 7 listed players to Casey's 14. And despite this, the Tigers started strongly before Casey clawed their way back into the game. The match continued to be a tightly contested contest with lead changes and strong performances on both sides. The Demons seemed a little top heavy. They held sway in the air, but were well beaten in the ruck, 48 hit-outs to 14. And the Tigers midfield won the clearance battles and the ground balls, allowing them to move away to a well-deserved 20-point victory. Tomlinson had an intriguing battle with Richmond's Jacob Kaczynski. Tomlinson finished with 38 disposals, but allowed his man to kick 4 goals. Shane McAdam was super impressive when he was on, but he was used sparingly, and his game was over by the final break, after which he and Colton Tolstrup, who had earlier suffered a head knock, were rested. Credit to Andy Moniz-Wakefield and Ollie Seston, who both had some impressive moments. Josh Shackey worked himself into the game, and he and Shane McAdam finished with 3 goals each. Tom Fullerton took some nice marks on his way to clunking 8 for the day and getting 2 goals. Will Varell also snagged 2 goals. Ben Brown had a bit of a shocker with only 7 disposals, and at some point sort of late in the game, or at the three-quarter time, he'd only had 2. Lockie Hunter continued to work away in his quest for an AFL return, while skipper Mitch White was a steadying influence. George, do you need to add anything else to that?
I think the only thing we need to point out for the Demon Land followers of Casey is we're really missing people like Moose at Casey level. We're playing Seston and Tolstrup as our mids. That gives you a fairly good idea of what we've lost in the middle. The Casey second stringers are just not that sort of same level as what we've had over the last couple of years. Really impressed with.
They've taken out. They're just playing in our seniors. Woden, Laurie, Howes.
Yeah, exactly. It's taken a lot of quality out of the side. Yeah. Varell, I think, is coming on really, really well. He was quite, for a guy that was sort of, where's he going to come? What's he going to do? We were saying at the start of the year, but he had 2 first quarter goals. His rucking's much better. Really competitive, which is what I'm sure Goody wants to see. I was disappointed in the way they were managing Jefferson, simply because they had Ben Brown, Shackey, resting rucks, all competing in the forward line. The poor kid had nowhere to go. If you're trying to develop someone, you don't need 2 other big talls sort of sitting around in the same amount of space. He was working a fair way up the ground as well. So it's not surprising that he didn't have anything in terms of output come the game. Ben Brown was nowhere to be seen. Now, I don't know whether they were just sort of giving him a gentle trot, so to speak, in terms of his load management, but he just didn't touch the ball whatsoever.
It didn't seem like he was having breaks, so he was on the ground the whole time.
But he wasn't doing anything. And and my question was, what are you actually doing with him? Because I think you're damaging Jefferson at the same time. Shackey, while he kicked 3 goals, they were because McAdam kicked 1 on his chest. Seston kicked another on his. Seston kicked 2 on his chest, so it wasn't surprising. Seston's coming along nicely now that he's getting some fitness. Tomlinson, of course, is another one of those players we talked about before who is too good for VFL, not quite good enough for AFL, it seems. He had 22 disposals before half time. Marty Hoare, I think, is certainly putting his hand up. He was magnificent in the back line. McAdam, they only gave limited time to. I think he only had 40 minutes game time, 45 minutes game time. He was spectacular. He was spectacular. Not just the screamer of a mark he took, but the work he did as well around the forward line. He's another Cozzy in the forward line. So I don't know how we're going to fit him in and where we fit him in, but.
And they're being cautious with him, so they'll probably do the same thing this week. They really don't want to just push him too hard. But next couple of weeks he'll be in.
Yep, he certainly will. Tolstrup, they were worried about at one point he got a heavy knock and he was off, but he got.
Sorry. He got 2 knocks. I don't know, if when I put my finger up like that, it made some. Yeah, look at that. So
people can't see us.
Balloons just came up. The software that we're using, I did sort of like the signal for two, like a victory sign, and balloons just came up on my pic. On my
No, they didn't, Andy. What's going on there, buddy? Are you okay?
Yeah.
I did say you were sick. How did Brown Dog play?
In and out. He wasn't as noticeable as what he was the previous week, but he's a development player. He's going to have up and down games. It wasn't down by any stretch, but he seems to be able to find the ball at the right times. So that's good. Tolstrup was off for 20 minutes on a concussion protocol, but came back on because he obviously passed it. But he got some really heavy knocks during the game. But we've got a few who are looking very promising down there. McAdam, Verrill, I think ready to take the next step. Fullerton kicked a couple of goals and he's certainly played better than what he has before. I'd be having Verrill in the side before Fullerton at the moment. In terms of, Fullerton's really more of a forward than a ruck, because Verrill's certainly better in the ruck than Fullerton is, and if he was recruited as a max backup, well, I don't think that's going to work at the moment. I'd be having Verrill in the team.
Why on earth did they play that game on a Wednesday? I know it was ANZAC Eve, but it's not. It was at Punt Road, not the MCG. So why did they play that game on a Wednesday?
I think we both had the week off before.
Yeah.
Why not play it on the weekend?
So no.
It'd be about player management as well. Those
in the VFL, maybe.
Yeah, but players that would potentially play AFL the following week or
the
previous week. So,
yep.
All right, let's move on. Injury list on the injury front. Appears we got through Wednesday night's game unscathed. Well, we haven't heard anything yet, so make it a shock tomorrow. Might be a question mark, as you said, over Colton Tolstrup. He did cop 2 head knocks in the twos. He did go off for a concussion test, but then came back on. But I think he spent some time off in the last quarter anyway, so who knows what's going to happen there. Everyone else on the injury list is still at least 2 to 3 to 4 weeks away, with the exception of Melksham, who's got a little bit longer. So no one is knocking on the door of the medical room this week to get back into the team that's currently on the injury list. So given the injury list, the fact that McAdam, he was only used sparingly, so I can't see them bringing him in this week, and I really can't see us making any changes unless it's cosmetic regarding the subs. So gentlemen, your changes for this week against the Cats, Binman, followed by George.
I think my guess will be they'll bring Hunter in. Laurie will go back to Casey, play a full game at Casey, and Windsor will start as a sub. I just think that they're the one would really, to a degree, the Cats is how seasoned their players are, how strong they are. They'll have Guthrie's back in the team, Tui's back in the team. They've got a lot of physically strong players. It's great that I'm happy enough that Danger's not going to be one of them. So I wonder whether on a big MCG, big game, 60,000 people, that Goody will be keen to get Hunter back in the team just for his physical strength and his grunt and his sort of refusal to back down and brings Windsor on if there's no injuries to either replace Hunter if he's drops off a little bit, or Billings. So Billings and Hunter can share the wing the same way that Billings and Windsor has, and then all things being equal, no injuries. You bring on a player with the leg speed of Windsor in the last quarter or at the end of the third quarter who could really make a big difference. And if they're subbing him off now, part of the management program would make sense to do it. I just have a feeling that Goody will want Hunter's grunt in there for this game.
George?
Difficult again, because I think instead of looking at this as one game, they'll be looking at it as more a combined game to be making selections from. So what I'm sort of getting at is we might see, for example, Petty drop out of this game and a Ben Brown come in, or they might play Petty this week and then Ben Brown the following week, because that 5-day break is going to be really telling, and I think the same thing is going to occur between the Windsor, Laurie, Hunter, Billings type of arrangement. I don't think you'll see the same players playing the following week. Again, this all comes down to the management. Hunter wasn't impressive in the Casey
I
game.
thought he played all right, apparently.
He did the previous week, played
Right,
really
okay.
well. But this week he was, neither here nor there sort of thing.
Right.
But you're right, he's got a stronger body, and you don't want to be burning Windsor out. I wouldn't be, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see Hunter come back in, give Windsor a break in the Cats game, but bring him back for the Carlton game. That sort of scenario. Same with Laurie, whether he needs a run at Casey to get some miles into his legs, then he might be brought back for the Carlton game. That sort of scenario. Same with Wowie. I suspect he'll be in the same boat.
A guy like Hunter should have been tearing it up in a game.
He should have. Yeah, he should have been.
7 AFL listed players on the other team. The guy who should be in our best 22 really should have been ball on a string.
It'll be interesting.
I hardly noticed him, to tell you the truth.
And 2 games back in the VFL. If he doesn't get picked this week, I reckon that will be an interesting comment on where the club see him as at. Because the other alternative is Laurie starts. The same lineup, no change. Laurie starts on the ground and Windsor starts on the bench, and Laurie sort of fits into the midfield rotation, or plays sort of a wing, sort of half forward wing role with Billings. Although, I just have a feeling they'll want to have Hunter in.
We were talking about Woden earlier. Marty Hall, is he?
Well, I think he's in the mix. I just think, Goody, I reckon George's point's a really interesting one about looking at those 2 games like 2. I just think if you look at history, so I think that's right. It's a good way to look at it. But Goody doesn't make many changes to teams that win. He just never has. And he makes left field selections, so anything could happen. Goody's made already this year some pretty left field selections, including he hasn't got much credit for turning a defender into a 3-goal. He kicked his first 3 goals in AFL footy. So that was a clever move by Goody, wasn't it? I mean, it was a winning move. Arguably, it was the difference in the match potentially. So he's not unprepared to make some pretty big calls, Goody. But probably, to contradict myself, the most likely scenario is no change because Goody doesn't make changes. So.
All right, well, the Cats have started the season shot out of a cannon, sit unbeaten on the top of the ladder, having won all 7 of the games to date. The Demons won their 5 of their 7 games this season and sit in the top 4 on percentage ahead of the Power and the Blues. And in a true 8-point game, the D's must win this week to hold on to their precarious position within the top 4 and also to make a massive statement by taking a huge 2024 scalp. Dangerfield is out with a hamstring injury, but All-Australian intercepting defender Tom Stewart, is that his name? Yes, Tom Stewart, should return from concussion. D Old Fart says Jeremy Cameron is an outstanding player in outstanding form, and he plays a unique role for the Cats. In my opinion, if we can limit his influence, it will take us a long way to beating them. I'd love to hear the panel's views on how we might go about this. Love the pods. Thanks, and keep up the great work, guys. Fritter and Turner asks, against the Cats, can we use our sub to manage a player like we did with Windsor? Well, we've sort of talked about that, so forget about that. But boys, a preview of this match as well as an answer to D. Old Fart's question. We've answered Fritter's question. So, George, followed by Bimman, your thoughts on this game?
Yes, we can beat the Cats, and I think the blueprint, so to speak, was given by Carlton. If Carlton had kicked straight in the first quarter where they kicked 2 goals 8, Carlton would have won the game. It was as simple as that. And
it was like watching a Melbourne game from previous years, wasn't it?
That was my next point. It was exactly the same problem that we had, particularly at the end of last season. The Cats gave up, even partially because Stewart wasn't there, but the Cats gave up 105 points to the opposition. You can't do that against any side if you're a top four contender. The fortunate thing for them was that the Carlton's got 0 defence apart from Wiedering as well. So the Cats got away with sheer murder. Almost invariably when I was watching the game, most of the Cats' goals came from turnovers in the back half, and they went the whole length of the field because Carlton has no. I don't think Carlton has any real defensive structures as such. So it was just you just watch this. Carlton would miss the shots. The ball would go from one end of the ground to the other, and the Cats would score. At one point in the game, the Cats had kicked 7 goals from 15 entries into 50.
Yeah,
that's how telling it was.
58%. In the end of the game, I think I heard it was like score inside 50 to score ratio was 58% of the times they went inside 50, they scored. That's
because there were no defensive structures and from one end of the ground to the other, basically. So Geelong got away with sheer murder in this game. They should not have been even close. If Carlton had kicked straight on in the first place, they would have won the game. If Carlton had a defensive structure, they would have won on the second case. So,
mind you, the Cats got 31 points up with only 4 or 5 minutes to go in the
So we won't let them get away with that. It's quite as simple as that. I think the other thing that's going to happen is the Cats' old legs are starting to they're starting to have the effect that we've talked about for the last couple of years. Dangerfield does a hamstring in this game when he only plays 5 minutes at a time. Tells you that Hawkins didn't score anything. He doesn't move outside the goal square these days compared to what he used to play, which will suit Stephen May absolutely perfectly. They're getting their scores from their new runners like Holmes, Myers, even Stengel up the forward line as a small forward. They're not the Cats that were there before. I don't think they can keep up this pace for the whole season. So
they brought in some good young players, Holmes, as you mentioned. I rate them pretty high, the Cats, and as I said, they're playing a very similar game, or we're playing a very similar game to them. They're probably, they're a year ahead of us in terms of playing that method, so that's an advantage for them. I think that, the query I have with the Blues is a bit the same as defensively. That fast transition model really exposes defensive systems. And I think, as I've said before, we're best placed of any team in the AFL to protect against that. He's still going to get goals scored against us, but we've shown our ability to be able to defend that fast ball movement from the back half better than probably any club in the AFL, I suspect. And certainly better than Blues, and they were all out of shape. I mean, mind you, they were missing Marchbank, Sard, and McGovern, the Blues. So, I've got a query on them, but they've also given up the 10th most scores in the AFL. So I was really interested in your use of the word precarious there, Andy, like a bit of MFCSS, our precarious hold on the top 4. Why precarious? I mean, it doesn't.
We're out of the top 4. That's why I say
we're 4th. But it's not precarious. We're 6 percentage points clear of Port Adelaide in 5th, and Carlton have only got 112. We've played the same number of games now. Everyone's played the same number of games. They've had the same number of wins as us, the Blues, yet we've got 14% more than them, and people are questioning us. Our spot's precarious. Andy, come on.
What I'm saying is if Port beat Adelaide and Carlton beat Collingwood and we lose to Geelong, we're out of the top 4.
Yeah, well, that's not precarious, is it? that's a fairly. I think we're going to win this game, and I think we're going to win it well. And I'm really, really looking forward to it, because every single season we play Geelong down at Cardinia Park around the bye for the last 3 or 4 seasons, when for a whole range of reasons we're not in the best shape. We're going to be in optimal shape. We've targeted this game. I think we'll smash them. I think we'll smash them right from the beginning. Miss Bargonagus a couple of weeks ago, that was such an astute observation. We won't jump out to a lead. We didn't in the Richmond game. We sort of mirror the opposition and stick with them, like boxers who, 2 or 3 rounds in, and then we go hard in the second half. We're the highest scoring side the third highest scoring side in fourth quarters in the AFL. We are in good shape. I think, that question about Cameron, he is an absolutely critical player. Goody isn't likely to run someone a tag on him. Goody doesn't do a hard tag. So I suspect they'll play him much like they did Bolton, where he, in the forward line, he'll have a player. Whether I think Howes will go to him, maybe McVie. But I think Howes can take him. So he'll take him and he'll hand off when Cameron does what he does, which is push up the ground and essentially become a winger. So he's really just almost playing like a winger that's on the offensive side of the wing, as opposed to, say, Langdon, who's pushing way back into defense. It's, Cameron's almost playing the exact same role, but he spends more time in the forward line and pushes and becomes a dangerous forward. So I think what they'll do is hand off and let him take the ball, get his balls up the ground, and then when he comes back inside the arc, maybe Howes will take him, but McVie or Lever will come across. He's definitely a critical player. I think the advantage we have against their forward line is that we can send Maida Hawkins. We know how Hawkins is going to play. Cameron's a bit more variable in what they do with him. I think really for me the key is shutting Myers down, and having someone running hard on him, not a tag, but he is so critical to their inside 50s and really important high half forward transition role. I hope they put a bit of time into him. Stengel is a player that worries me because we just struggle against those sort of quality small mids, but I think McVie is the player who will get him. I'm super looking forward to this game. I think we'll win. I'm predicting a 3 to 4 goal win, maybe more if we can get on our bike and take our chances. I can't wait.
Interesting round of footy for the top 4 because we play Geelong and Sydney and GWS play each other. So it really is a 16-point game.
16.
Yeah, it really is. And if we win this game, it creates a big gap between sort of 8 and 9.
Yeah, it's huge. It is an 8-point game, and you won't catch me if we lose. I can promise you now, I won't be saying one of the factors is fatigue, because I am absolutely 100% convinced they are targeted this game, and their high performance program has been right from our first ball that was kicked last year in our pre-season has been designed for to peak on this day. That's the advantage of that bye. So. I think we will get a good read of where we're at, where the new game plan's at. But equally, so will the Cats. I'm sick of everyone creating these benchmark teams. The Cats, there's this thread on D-Lane talking about it, someone saying that we'll get a reality check when we play them. We won't be the team getting a reality check. It'll be the Cats getting a reality check. They beat the Blues. But other than that, every single one of their other victories is teams outside the 8. It's the classic, they haven't beaten anyone. We win this game. The Blues, I think I'm not nearly as confident against the Blues just because of that 5-day factor. But then we come into a period of time where we get back into a weekly rhythm, less travel interstate, none of these stupid less of these stupid Thursday night games. And so if we can get through these 2 games with even one win, we'll get to 6-2 if we beat the Cats, and we're a top 4 lock.
So the Cats have beaten St Kilda, Adelaide, Hawthorn, Bulldogs, North, Brisbane on a wet night at the Gabba, and now Carlton. So that's who they've played.
Is it too early for the ladder predict, Andy?
I did it the other day.
Really? Jeez. The weather on Saturday, partly cloudy, medium chance of showers, most likely later in the day. Oh, good Lord. Light winds becoming south to southeasterly 15 to 20 kilometres during the day.
So I did the ladder predictor and basically went with whoever was higher on the ladder. That's who won. So as the rounds went on, if the team was higher on the ladder, that's who won, which we all know it doesn't work like that. And we ended up fourth. Yeah.
Double chance. And did you factor the weather in for the rest of the year?
No, I had no weather to factor in. All right. we're going to leave it there with this nonsense about ladder predictors in round 7. If you want to listen to the show, come listen to us live as we're back on Monday nights from next week. Also, I think at the moment, thank you to our 5-star reviewers on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to Braggs, Woden and Mr. Noisy. Thank you to our voicemailers, Enzo, Salty, and first-time voicemailer, Molly. Your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to Monocular, Travi14, Red and Blue Rising, Demon Jack 14, Buck Naked, Return to Glory, Lazy, Red and Blue Beard, Phil C, Delightful Play, Scroll, El Diablo 14, Jane 02, Smurf, D Me, Doug Reamer, D Knox, D Old Fart, Fritter and Turner, and Demon WA. Thank you, of course, to my co-hosts, George and B-Man, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from. We'll read it out on the show next week. Go Demons.
Go Redleggers.
Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons. I've got this feeling, I know it's real, it's got